Chapter 1901. Beside the damaged battleship, Tian Yen led several of his Yu Yao subordinates and charged towards Lu Yi. As space pirates, they were all battle-hardened individuals. Naturally, they wouldn't foolishly charge at Lu Yi all at once. As they charged forward, they had already spread out, forming a semicircle around Lu Yi. The distance between them rapidly shrank. Some of the Yu Yao's silhouettes suddenly disappeared, and the might of arts and techniques began to blossom. Some cultivators even took out their transcendent artifacts and attacked Lu Yi. Even though Lu Yi had previously displayed extremely terrifying strength, the Thunderlight sect's Yu Yao didn't feel much fear. Suddenly, the might of arts and transcendent artifacts enveloped Lu Yi's silhouette, instantly drowning him. At this moment, Tian Yen suddenly cried out in alarm, "Careful!" When he turned his head to look, he saw that Lu Yi, who should have been in the distance, had somehow appeared beside one of their Yu Yao like a ghost. His pitch-black saber slashed horizontally, carrying not the slightest bit of killing intent or aura. The Yu Yao being targeted was the spell cultivator who had used the arts and techniques earlier. He had originally thought that he had succeeded, and had let his guard down. In the blink of an eye, that momentary lapse of concentration had turned into a fatal crisis. He hurriedly tried to retreat, but he discovered that it was too late. In his haste, he could only activate the might of his transcendent artifact to protect himself. Light suddenly erupted from his body. Immediately after, this light shattered, and his entire body stiffened as if he had been struck by lightning. His expression was one of terror. He had never imagined that the protective transcendent artifact he had placed such high hopes on wouldn't even be able to block a single attack from his opponent. Although the grade of his transcendent artifact wasn't very high, only 5-star, it was still a protective transcendent artifact. No matter what, it shouldn't have been broken so easily. He couldn't understand, and he couldn't think any further. This was because after his transcendent artifact was broken, another saber swiftly slashed down, directly splitting his body in half. After the Mountain Pan Saber had been upgraded to a transcendent artifact, aside from becoming sharper, it was especially effective against protective transcendent artifacts. Under normal circumstances, even if Lu Yi wielded a 7 or 8-star saber, he wouldn't be able to slice through his opponent's defenses with a single slash. However, the Mountain Pan Saber could. No blood flowed out. The instant the Yu Yao's body was split open, this Yu Yao turned into specks of light and shattered. This undoubtedly meant that the other party was just a shadow, and it was unknown which era the cultivator was from. Almost as soon as Lu Yi succeeded, several attacks mercilessly bombarded him from all directions. These space pirates didn't care about the life or death of their companions when they attacked, which was a testament to their ferocity. On the contrary, from their point of view, if this round of joint attacks could kill both their companions and Lu Yi, they would have profited. Lu Yi drifted away, and in the blink of an eye, she appeared beside another Yu Yao. Tian Yan's eyes were about to pop out of their sockets. He did not feel any heartache over the death of his subordinate Yu Yao. After all, he was not the true leader of the Thunderlight sect. This was merely his status as the leader of the Thunderlight sect. He did not have any actual relationship with Yu Yao. However, if too many of his subordinate Yu Yao died, it would not be beneficial to the development of his plan. It would also affect the rewards he would receive at the end of this training. "How dare you!" He roared furiously as he charged toward Lu Yi. He wanted to save Yu Yao, who had been targeted. However, how could he possibly make it in time? Just as he made his move, Yu Yao, who had been targeted by him, turned into fluorescent light and dissipated. After the first, there was a second. After the second, there was a third. To Tian Yan's dismay, the Yu Yao under his command could not even touch the corner of his enemy's clothes. He did not know what kind of secret technique this leader of the 9 heavens cultivated. He moved here and there like a ghost. There was no way to grasp any pattern to his movements. If this were all, it would have been fine. However, the key was that the saber in his hand possessed an extremely terrifying destructive power. Even the second leader under his command, who was ranked in the top 1,000 of the battle roll, could not last more than 3 breaths of time against him. How could the other Yu Yao be a match for him? The only one present who could fight against him was him. However, the other party did not exchange blows with him at all. All he did was jump about and annoy him. As a member of the Stone Tribe, his physique was strong enough. However, when it came to speed and agility, he was far inferior to the other party. He knew that if this continued, the Yu Yao under his command would probably all be slaughtered. Thus, he made a prompt decision and roared, "All of you retreat." He was going to personally deal with this leader of the 9 heavens. The other party did not dare to exchange blows with him. It was obvious that he had sensed that he was not someone to be trifled with. The Yu Yao who had been lucky enough to survive had long been scared witless by Lu Ye's attacks. When they heard Tianyan's command, how could they hesitate in the slightest? They all scattered like birds and beasts, fear lingering in their hearts. Even so, Lu Yi had still managed to kill one of them. Tianyan had already charged over. His body, which looked like it had been carved out of stone, glowed with a bright light. His entire body swelled into a small giant, and a blazing light burst out from his eyes. He clenched his hand into a fist and shot it out fiercely. He roared furiously, "Die!" Lu Yi, who had just finished off one of the Yu Yao, suddenly turned around. Light flashed on the Panshan saber, and the divine edge spirit patterns had already been added to it. He swung the saber to meet that massive fist. In the instant that the fist and saber collided, the ferocious clash of powers turned into shock waves that could be seen with the naked eye. These shock waves spread out in all directions, enveloping a large part of the galaxy. The overwhelming fury in Tianyan's eyes turned into astonishment. His massive figure was sent flying backward. His vision turned upside down, and his expression was one of bewilderment and helplessness. Even though he had already known that the paragon of the 9 heavens was very strong before they had exchanged blows, it was only after they had actually exchanged blows that he discovered that the other party's strength was actually much stronger than he had imagined. The terrifying power that came with the slash of the saber actually made even him feel ashamed of his inferiority. This was the human race? There were only a few races in the galaxy that could compete with the Stone Tribe in physical strength at the same cultivation level. However, this definitely did not include the human race. What was with the terrifying power that the other party had suddenly released? What made Tianyan even more shocked was that he had clearly sensed that as the other party's saber slashed down, a crack had actually appeared on his fist. This was a very inconceivable thing. Because in terms of the toughness of their physiques, the Stone Tribe could be ranked in the top 3 in the entire galaxy. A powerful physique had always been the foundation of their existence, and it was also the natural advantage of this race. Even compared to transcendent treasures of the same level, their physique was superior. Yet now, it had actually been broken by a single slash of the saber. At first, he had thought that the paragon of the 9 heavens had been avoiding him all this time because he was apprehensive of his strength. Now, after exchanging blows, he finally realized that this was not the case at all. On the other side, Lu Ye's figure immediately stabilized after sliding for a dozen or so miles. It had to be said that the strength of a late-stage Yu Yao Stone Tribe member was indeed a little ridiculously strong. If it were not for the fact that he had reached the pinnacle of the constellation tier and had grown tremendously after reaching the Yu Yao Stone Tribe, he might not have been the other party's match in a clash of pure strength. Without any pause, Lu Yi dragged his saber and charged forward. Tianyan had just managed to stabilize himself with great difficulty when he sensed an extremely ferocious aura swiftly rushing toward him. He roared furiously, his expression filled with defiance as he brazenly charged toward Lu Yi. "I definitely didn't perform well just now." The two figures, one large and one small, clashed together. Fists bombarded the void, saber light bloomed wantonly, and magic power clashed endlessly. After a short while, Tianyan turned around and fled. "I can't fight." This paragon of the 9 heavens was too nimble, and he was always a beat slower. The other party's strength was even stronger than his, and his magic power seemed to be even purer and surging. What made him feel the most despair was the saber in the other party's hand. It was terrifyingly sharp, and his physique, which he had tempered all his life, was actually unable to block each slash. In this short period of time, Tianyan's whole body was covered in wounds. Moreover, he could clearly feel that there was actually a strange power lingering in these wounds, preventing them from healing. For the time being, he still had the power to protect himself, but he was sure that if this continued, he would undoubtedly die. While he still had some strength left, he naturally had to run as far as he could. As for the reward for this experiential training, he was about to lose his life, so what reward would he need? This was not the first time he had failed in this experiential training, and Tianyan had long since become accustomed to it. He naturally knew when to make a choice. What made him feel fortunate was that the Paragon of the Nine Heavens had no intention of hunting him down. He only watched as he fled into the depths of the galaxy. However, he felt so sullen. He was clearly only one step away from success. Lu Yi of the Nine Heavens, Tianyan imprinted this name deeply into his mind. Because there was no telling when he would encounter this figure again in future experiential training. At that time, he definitely could not become enemies with the other party. The Paragon had fled. Yu Yao had suffered heavy casualties. The Thunder Light Pirate Gang instantly panicked. Originally, when Lu Yi was fighting with Tianyan and the other Yu Yao pirates, the Thunder Light Pirate Gang was still chasing after the Nine Heavens Pirate Gang aggressively. However, with Lu Ye's return, the Thunder Light Pirate Gang also scattered. Lu Yi returned to his main battleship. In the fierce battle just now, this main battleship had been beaten to a pulp, and many of the Tiger Shark battleships under his command had also suffered heavy losses. Paragon. Zi Shao led a group of pirates over to greet Lu Yi, a look of worship on his face. Although they had been fleeing just now, they had also witnessed their Paragon's invincibility with their own eyes. For these pirates, who were constantly on the brink of death, having such a Paragon watching over them was undoubtedly a stabilizing force that made them feel at ease. How are the casualties? Lu Yi asked. Zi Shao hurriedly replied, "We've lost about 30% of our men." And this was because Lu Ye's side had dealt with them quickly enough. Otherwise, the casualties would definitely have been much higher. Lu Yi nodded. 30% was still within the acceptable range. What should we do next? Zi Shao asked. The various changes just now were truly unexpected. The Nine Heavens Pirate Gang had originally cooperated with the Thunder Light Pirate Gang to hunt down the Black Cloud Fleet. In the end, their Paragon had beaten the Thunder Light Pirate Gang to a pulp and even chased them away. This was somewhat comical, but from Zi Zhao's point of view, this matter could not be blamed on the Paragon. After all, the Thunder Light Pirate Gang was the one who attacked first. How could the Paragon not retaliate when he was so strong? Who would have thought that the Thunder Light Pirate Gang would be so weak and would be chased away by the Paragon in just a few moves? He had followed the Paragon for so many years, but he really did not know that his Paragon's strength was so impressive. Lu Yi turned to look at the battlefield. The situation on the battlefield was very clear. Under the coordination of the Thunder Light Pirate Gang, the various pirate gangs had already gained the absolute upper hand against the Black Cloud Fleet. At this moment, the fleeing Black Cloud Fleet had also been surrounded by the pirate gangs, and there was nowhere for them to run. End of chapter. Chapter 1902. Even if Lei Guang, who was in charge of the coordination, was gone, and all the pirate gangs were in a state of disunity, the chances of Black Cloud turning the tables were not high. If he did not do anything, He Yun would definitely be killed here. Therefore, Lu Yi only thought for a moment before saying, "Join the battle with me and escort Black Cloud away." Zi Shao was shocked. Huh! The many pirates behind him also looked at Lu Yi in disbelief. Huge questions popped up in their minds. Aren't we pirates? Escort Black Cloud away. What does this mean? However, in the next moment, Zi Shao revealed a look of understanding. He looked at Lu Yi with even more admiration. I understand. We swear to follow you to death. A group of pirates also shouted, We swear to follow you to death. Where could they find such a powerful leader? Therefore, no matter what incomprehensible decision the leader made, they would not have any disobedience. Lu Yi could not help but look at Zi Shao. What do you understand? Zi Shao said excitedly, Doesn't the leader want to take all the benefits for himself? Let's escort Black Cloud away first, and then. He raised his hand and made a gesture of raising his hand and slashing down. This was undoubtedly the thinking of an experienced pirate. With so many pirate gangs working together, even if they took down Black Cloud, how much benefit could they get? However, if they took all the benefits for themselves, it would be different. They would definitely be able to eat until they were fat. As expected of the leader, he was bold with his skills. Lu Ye's eyes flashed, but he did not explain. Of course, he did not want to take all the benefits for himself. Indeed, in this training scenario, the mission given to him by the Shuraba was to work together with the other pirate gangs to hunt down the Black Cloud fleet and kill all the cultivators of Black Cloud. Such an experience was indeed not difficult for him. Looking at all the things that he had experienced before, the biggest difficulty was the trick that his second leader had conspired with Qin Ru and her mother. If he did not have the talent tree, he might have fallen into their trap. This was also in line with the information he learned from Qin Shenhai. Cultivators for the first time would not encounter missions that were too difficult. However, even if it was just a training, Lu Yi was not willing to commit crimes. Along the way, he had been thinking about what to do. Until Lei Guang attacked first and he counterattacked. Now that he had driven Lei Guang away and killed many pirates, he might as well go all the way. Punishing evil, eliminating the strong and helping the weak, it was the duty of cultivators. As for the second leader's misunderstanding, let him be. It would not affect anything. The Nine Heavens pirate gang, who had been watching for a long time, finally joined the battlefield. Tiger sharks surrounded the main battleship and they headed toward the battlefield. The Black Cloud fleet was besiegement and had no time to pay attention to other things. Black Cloud of course, Black Cloud fleet. The Cloud fleet, Black Cloud of heaven, Black Cloud of hell, Black Cloud was fleet, Blacky Black of Black Fleet. This made it extremely easy for Jiutian to enter. This was because the Star Pirates did not treat Jiutian as an outsider at all. They took the initiative to open up a gap in the encirclement, allowing Jiutian's battleship to enter successfully. Without any warning, the battleships of the Nine Heavens pirate gang launched fierce attacks in all directions. Caught off guard, the battleships of the Nine Heavens pirate gang in the vicinity were hit one after another. Lu Yi took the lead, leading his own pirate gang to charge forward. Wherever they passed, they destroyed everything in their way, tearing a huge hole in the chaotic battlefield. At the center of the encirclement, on the deck of a huge battleship, a charming woman stood on the side of the ship, looking at the battle situation around her worriedly. She felt that she was really unlucky. She was only at the Constellation realm, but she was thrown into such a training scene. Furthermore, she was the successor of the Black Cloud sect. The mission requirement for this training was to seek refuge in a nearby star system under the escort of the Black Cloud sect cultivators. Normally, the training in the Azura field would be based on the level of cultivation. She was at the Constellation realm, so logically speaking, the scene she entered should be able to deal with. She had also heard that some unlucky people would be thrown into some scenes that they could not deal with. But she had never thought that she would become such an unlucky person one day, because the probability of such a thing happening was really too low. Looking at this huge battlefield, what could she, a Constellation realm cultivator, do? She could only stay here in a daze, unable to control her own fate. She was flustered and uneasy. Since the beginning of the escape, the Black Cloud fleet's strength had been weakened bit by bit. At this moment, they were even surrounded here, unable to move forward. The pirate gangs were like sharks that smelled blood, pouncing over from all directions, making her feel depressed. Even so, she was still looking for that glimmer of light, because she knew that the Azura field would not arrange a death trap for her. The various scenes in the Azura field were for training. If it was a death trap, then the essence of the training would be lost. She still had some expectations. Perhaps the cultivators from the neighboring star systems would receive the news and come to her rescue, or perhaps the Black Cloud sect master's secret instructions to her before his death would be verified. Her identity for this training was the successor of the Black Cloud sect. The deceased Black Cloud sect master was her father in name. A father's earnest instructions to his daughter before his death were naturally trustworthy and something to look forward to. but she had never seen that glimmer of light. At this moment, there was suddenly an abnormal movement in the noisy battlefield. She hurriedly turned her head to look in that direction. Unfortunately, because she was not strong enough and the battlefield was too chaotic, she could not see too clearly. She could only ask, "Elder Lon, what's going on over there?" Behind her, a valiant and formidable-looking woman with a half-mask covering half of her face stood with a sword in her hand. She was the Elder Lon that the charming woman had spoken of, and was also the second strongest expert of the Black Cloud continent. Since the beginning of their escape, she had been guarding the charming woman's side. Elder Lon also noticed the movement over there at this moment. She took a look and frowned. "I don't know why there's an internal conflict in the pirate gangs. One of the pirate gangs is attacking their companions and is approaching us." The charming woman's beautiful eyes lit up. "Which pirate gang?" Elder Lon looked again and said, "It seems to be the Nine Heavens pirate gang." The main battleship of the Nine Heavens pirate gang had the words, "Nine Heavens," engraved on it. She naturally recognized it. Nine Heavens. The charming woman only felt that the name was familiar, as if she had heard it somewhere before. She did not have time to think about it and hurriedly said, "Let them come over." Elder Lon was stunned. "Young sect master, they are pirates." The destruction of the Black Cloud and the endless escape were caused by this group of pirates. Elder Lon hated these guys to the core. Why would she take the initiative to let them come close? The charming woman pondered for a moment. Her telepathic thoughts surged and she quietly said something to Elder Lon. Elder Lon's eyes could not help but widen. She looked at the charming woman in shock. "Xiao Rao, this is not a joke." The charming woman said, "Father told me this personally before he died. Why would I joke about it? Elder Lon, this is the only chance we have to get out of this predicament." The glimmer of light she had been waiting for had finally arrived. Sure enough, the trial in the Azura field was not a hopeless situation. Elder Lon nodded after hearing that these were the last words of the old sect master. She took out a sound talisman and passed down the order. In the direction of the Nine Heavens pirate gang, Lu Yi killed his way over. He originally thought that it would be difficult to approach the Black Cloud fleet, but who would have thought that as the Nine Heavens approached, the Black Cloud fleet would take the initiative to accept them? This puzzled him. He did not know what the Black Cloud fleet was thinking. But no matter what, this was a good thing for him. Suddenly, his body continued to move forward until he saw a huge battleship. His body flashed and he rushed toward it. Since he wanted to cooperate with the Black Cloud fleet and escort them out of the encirclement, Lu Yi naturally had to make his stance clear to the people in charge here. The fact that he had taken the initiative to kill the pirates just now was a demonstration of his sincerity. The Black Cloud fleet should have sensed his intentions. Otherwise, they would not have taken the initiative to accept him. Lu Yi landed on the spacious deck. He immediately sensed several Yu-Yao auras and telepathic thoughts locking onto him. He glanced around and saw a woman wearing a half-mask and holding a sword. Her aura was very strong. She was undoubtedly at the late stage of Yu-Yao. This female sword cultivator had a cautious look on her face. Although she had not personally exchanged blows with Lu Yi, she knew that Lu Yi's strength was definitely not inferior to hers from how invincible Lu Yi had been. Their eyes met, and Lu Yi nodded slightly. Just as he was about to ask her about her identity, he heard someone behind the female sword cultivator make a sound of surprise. Lu Yi looked over, and when he saw the charming face, he could not help but be stunned. This was because he realized that he recognized this woman. Moreover, he had cooperated with her in the past. It was just that so many years had passed, and they had not interacted with each other. Who would have thought that they would meet here? This was truly fate. Compared to the past, this woman had not changed much. It was just that her cultivation had increased significantly. If they were outside, the two of them would naturally recognize each other immediately. However, this was the Azura arena, so it was better for them not to do things that did not suit their current identities. Thus, Lu Yi only nodded slightly at the other party and said indifferently, "Lu Yi of the Nine Heavens, who can make the decision?" The charming woman walked out from behind Elder Lon with a smile on her face. "Young sect master of the Black Cloud fleet, Yu Yao Rao." "Young sect master, be careful." Elder Lan still maintained her vigilance and raised her hand to stop Yu Yaorao. However, Yu Yaorao shook her head slowly, and her face was full of confidence. "It's okay. Won't hurt me." Elder Lan's eyes flickered. She recalled the words that Yu Yaorao had transmitted to her just now, and she already understood. Lu Yi did not know whether to laugh or cry. When he saw Yu Yaorao, he had already guessed that she was really the successor of the Black Cloud Fleet. He secretly rejoiced. Fortunately, he had abandoned the darkness and joined the light. Otherwise, when he finally saw Yu Yaorao, should he attack or not? Attacking was out of the question. They knew each other, and Yu Yaorao had helped him a lot at the reincarnation tree. However, if he did not attack, it would mean that all his previous efforts would have been in vain. Now, there was no need to worry about this. End of chapter. Chapter 1903. On the deck of Black Cloud's main battleship, Yu Yaorao bowed to Lu Yi and said, "Xiaorao greet second uncle." Lu Yi was stunned for a moment. He didn't understand what she meant by calling him second uncle, but when he saw Yu Yaorao winking at him, he immediately understood that Yu Yaorao was giving him an identity that matched his actions just now. He thought for a moment and said, "It has been many years since we last met. Xiaorao has also grown up." Then he changed the topic and said, "Let's not talk too much. I will escort you to break out of the encirclement first." Yu Yaorao hurriedly asked, "Second uncle, what are you going to do?" Lu Yi turned his head and looked ahead. "I will lead the way. You all follow me." As soon as he finished speaking, he jumped up and charged towards the battleships of the pirate group in that direction. Yu Yaorao was shocked and hurriedly ordered, "Follow him." At the same time, she looked at Lu Yi with worry. When they first met, both of them were only Divine Sea Realm cultivators. At that time, her cultivation was even higher than Lu Ye's by a small realm. But now, she was only a star constellation cultivator, while Lu Yi was already Yu Yao. There was a gap of a whole realm between them. Yu Yaorao had no idea how Lu Yi cultivated and how his cultivation had increased so much. However, having a high cultivation was one thing, and having the corresponding strength was another. Although the pirate group looked like a mass of loose sand, there were too many of them. If one didn't have enough strength to charge in alone, one would definitely not have a good end. While she was on tenterhooks, a shocking scene appeared before her eyes. As the saber light flashed, the tiger shark warships in front of it were blasted apart without being able to put up any resistance, turning into balls of brilliant flames. In just a dozen breaths of time, the originally impenetrable encirclement was cleared out and a smooth passage was created. The Black Cloud Fleet immediately moved forward along this passage. Seeing that the Black Cloud Fleet showed signs of escaping, the attacks of the pirate groups gathered around became more and more fierce. Colorful lights attacked from all directions. This huge battlefield was like a firework feast. Under the gorgeous scenery, the aura of countless lives was annihilated. The cultivators on Black Cloud's side were undoubtedly extremely loyal. Countless cultivators were riding tiger sharks or small warships, surrounding and protecting the main warship where Yu Yaorao was. While they were doing their best to resist the attacks of the pirate groups, they were also using themselves as the main warship's protection. The 9 Heaven Space Pirate gang that came with Lu Yi joined them, too. Zi Xiao, the third head of the gang, was greatly alarmed and uneasy. Although he admired his boss's decision to keep all the treasures to himself, he did not realize that it was not an easy task to achieve his goal until he reached this step. Originally, they were supposed to be part of the pirate gang, but now, they had become the target of attack. The reversal of their positions was really thorough. All of a sudden, a battleship appeared in front of Lu Yi. It was unknown which pirate gang it belonged to. Seeing Lu Yi charging forward, the arrays on the battleship buzzed, and beams of light converged into powerful attacks that blasted towards Lu Yi. Lu Yi was able to easily evade the attacks. Although the attacks from the warships were formidable, they required a certain amount of time to charge up. Thus, they were not suitable for dealing with cultivators, as they could be easily evaded. A huge blade shadow was brought out again. Lu Ye's imposing aura and blade shadow soared at the same time as he charged forward, and soon after, he slashed at the battleship. Compared to the Thunderlight Sect's main battleship, the grade of the battleship was undoubtedly inferior. In addition, the pirate gang failed to adjust their defenses in time. Thus, the attack directly cut the huge battleship in two, and the cut was as smooth as a mirror. It was unknown how many pirates died under this attack, and the rest fled in panic. Yu Yaorao watched this scene from afar, her heart surging. She could not help but recall that in the Alpha Origin stage, Lu Yi also seemed to be invincible. Therefore, even if she did not obtain the qualifications to be ranked in the top 100 at that time, it was because of Lu Ye's protection that she was able to safely wait until the end. In the end, she obtained a spirit light from the Alpha Origin stage and was promoted to a constellation mansion. After so many years, a sense of security once again lingered in her heart. It was as if as long as this man stood in front of her, all her worries would vanish. Amazing! Beside her, Elder Lon could not help but praise. Yu Yaorao asked, "How is Elder Lon compared to second uncle?" Elder Lon shook her head. "I'm far inferior to him." Yu Yaorao's red lips curled up slightly. She knew that Elder Lon was a proud and arrogant person. As a sword cultivator and the strongest person in the Black Cloud sect, an ordinary Yu Yao would not be able to compare to her. However, Lu Yi could actually make her admit that she was far inferior. As this thought flashed through her mind, several figures suddenly pounced towards Lu Yi from all directions. Yu Yaorao could not help but send a voice transmission, "Be careful." She could tell that those figures were all Yu Yao. Although Lu Yi had already displayed terrifying individual strength, destroying numerous tiger sharks and a main battleship, these Yu Yao had grasped the opportunity to attack with great precision. They clearly felt that Lu Yi had consumed a lot of energy after destroying the main battleship, so if they did not act now, when would they? "I'll go help him," Elder Lon said anxiously. The long sword in his hand let out a clear sword hum, and he charged into the battlefield in front of him with sword light. However, before she could reach the battlefield, Lu Yi had already raised his saber and cut down the fiercest Yu Yao closest to him like he was slaughtering a chicken. If that was all, it would be fine. More importantly, the one he had killed was a late-stage Yu Yao. The Yu Yao had sensed that something was amiss and had put up a defensive barrier in time, but it was as fragile as paper. Elder Lon could not help but narrow her eyes as she secretly rejoiced. Fortunately, this person was a member of Black Cloud. If he was really a space pirate, Black Cloud would have been doomed. After killing one, Lu Yi immediately charged towards the second Yu Yao. Seeing that Lu Yi was still as ferocious as ever, the Yu Yao did not dare to approach and hurriedly turned around to flee. However, he did not expect that Elder Lon would appear and block his path. Seeing this, Lu Yi immediately changed targets. 10 breaths later, all the Yu Yao who had attacked him had either died or fled. The situation was clear. One could not blame the Yu Yao for being so cowardly. Their companions had simply died too quickly. If any one of the Yu Yao had been able to stall Lu Yi for a while, they would have been able to see some hope of victory. However, even a late-stage Yu Yao could not withstand 3 of Lu Ye's saber strikes. Who else would dare to be impudent? Space pirates were a group of people who sought benefits the most and avoided harm the most. They would never do anything without benefits. When there were benefits, they would rush forward, but when there was danger, they would run away faster than anyone else. If Lei Guang was still here, then under Lei Guang's overall command, it wouldn't be so easy to deal with the joint forces of the pirate gangs. However, Lei Guang had already been killed by Lu Yi, and even the leader of Lei Guang had fled. Although there were many space pirate gangs, it was difficult for them to accomplish anything when they were all in a state of disunity. The tight encirclement had been completely broken through. When the battered Black Cloud fleet escaped through the gap, it meant that this chase had come to an end. The Black Cloud fleet gradually disappeared into the distance. Space pirate gangs of all sizes gathered together, with Lu Yi standing in the middle. He alone blocked the starry sky, but not a single space pirate dared to be impudent. That pitch-black long blade was like a bottomless black hole. In this battle, it was unknown how many space pirates had been killed. Only when the space pirate gangs that were unwilling but unable to do anything dispersed did Lu Yi turn around and chase in the direction of the Black Cloud fleet. When he caught up with the fleeing Black Cloud fleet, he strangely discovered that the size of the entire fleet had become a lot larger. There were obviously many new warships in the fleet. On the Black Cloud fleet's main warship, Yu Yaorao was waving at him. Lu Yi rushed up and discovered that there were some unfamiliar faces here. At this moment, they were sizing him up. Yu Yaorao knew that he was puzzled, so she took the initiative to explain. Only then did Lu Yi know that the neighboring galaxy had sent a fleet and cultivators to pick them up. However, due to the long distance, they had arrived a little late. They had only arrived after the fierce battle had ended. Under Yu Yaorao's introduction, they greeted each other. It could be seen that Yu Yaorao was very happy because at this point in the experiential learning, her mission was basically over. This trip was daunting but not dangerous. Moreover, participating in this kind of experiential learning with the body of a constellation, the rewards she obtained would not be too bad. After chatting for a while, Lu Yi bid farewell and left. His identity here was the leader of the space pirates, so it was naturally inappropriate for him to follow them to the neighboring galaxy. The few Yu Yao who had rushed over were looking at him with an expression full of fear. Obviously, they had heard of his previous astonishing achievements. After bidding farewell to Yu Yaorao, Lu Yi leaped up and left. The Nine Heavens space pirate gang's warship was waiting in the distance. "Second uncle." Yu Yaorao's voice came from behind. Lu Yi turned around and saw her hurriedly flying over. Lu Yi stood still. When she got close, Yu Yaorao suddenly flipped her hand and an object appeared in her hand. Lu Yi looked at it and recognized at a glance that it was the treasure he saw when he entered the experiential learning. It was a spherical object that was green all over. The destruction of the Black Cloud fleet was caused by it. His experiential learning mission this time was to seize this treasure and then kill all the cultivators of the Black Cloud fleet. Take a look and see if this is a real treasure. Yu Yaorao handed it over. According to the information I received, this treasure is related to the secret of a cultivator's breakthrough to sunshine. It was precisely because of this that it attracted the covetous eyes of so many space pirates. Ordinary treasures would not bring such a disaster to the Black Cloud fleet. Lu Yi raised his eyebrows. He picked up the sphere and tried to pour his magic power into it, but there was no reaction. He probed with his divine sense, but he did not detect anything. He shook his head and said, "It shouldn't be." Some of the treasures that appeared in the experiential learning mission were real, which meant that they could be taken out and used, but some were fake. For example, this sphere was just a prop in this experiential learning mission. On the surface, it hid the secret of the breakthrough to sunshine, but in fact, it was nothing. That's a pity. Yu Yaorao felt somewhat regretful. If this treasure really hid the secret of the breakthrough to sunshine, then its value would be unlimited. Especially since Lu Yi happened to be at the late stage of Yu Yao, this treasure should be useful to him. Chapter 1904. Lu Yi handed the so-called treasure back to Yu Yaorao, but she pursed her lips and smiled. "I'll give it to you." No matter whether this thing was a real treasure or not, giving it to Lu Yi would affect her final reward because this was one of her tasks for this experiential learning, and she had to take this treasure away. However, if it wasn't for Lu Yi, she might have lost her life. Now, it was thanks to Lu Yi that she could complete the experiential learning, so it didn't matter if she gave it away. Lu Yi didn't refuse. Immediately, the two exchanged the Azura token's imprint, and Yu Yaorao winked at him playfully. "Second uncle, see you later." She turned around and left. Lu Yi watched her leave. Soon, the Black Cloud fleet that had reorganized set off into the distance until it disappeared at the end of his field of vision. Lu Yi was about to return to the Nine Heavens Star Pirate Gang when he suddenly found that he couldn't move, as if there was an invisible force imprisoning him. He didn't panic because he roughly knew what had happened. The surrounding scenery suddenly shattered, and then the world collapsed. Dots of fluorescent light gathered from all directions, and then poured into his Azura token. His field of vision suddenly became clear. When Lu Yi came back to his senses, he was no longer in the vast starry sky. The rich aura of the domain enveloped him, and there were traces of cultivators suddenly appearing and disappearing around him. The first experiential learning was over, and he returned to the heavenly Azura realm. Looking around, and using the Azura token to perceive the location of his cave, Lu Yi found that he had returned to the same place where he entered the experiential learning, and there seemed to be no change. But the next moment, Lu Yi revealed a look of surprise and looked down at his right hand. Because he found that he had brought back something, and it was the treasure that Yu Yaorao gave him in the end. Was this really a treasure? Lu Yi was stunned. When he received this treasure, he clearly checked it carefully, but he didn't find anything, so he naturally thought that this thing was just a prop in that experiential learning. If that was the case, then it was impossible for him to bring this treasure out of the experiential learning, but in the end, because this treasure was in his hands, he would be given more Azura seals as a reward. Since he could bring it out, it meant that this thing wasn't a useless prop, it was really a treasure. Lu Yi was amazed. Could it be? This treasure was really related to the secret of Cultivator's promotion? Lu Yi carefully examined it again, but still found nothing. Lu Yi wanted to put it into his storage ring, but found that he couldn't. This made him extremely surprised. There were 3 possibilities for things that could not be stored in a storage ring. One was that the object was too large and exceeded the storage ring's capacity. The second possibility was that the object had its own internal space, which conflicted with the storage ring's space. Living creatures of flesh and blood. This ball-like object wasn't big, so it naturally didn't exceed the storage ring's capacity. This ball-like object wasn't alive either, so there was only one explanation. The interior of this object had a space of its own. This was beyond Lu Ye's expectations. Lu Yi didn't examine it carefully. Instead, he returned to his cave and took out the Azura token. Now that the experiential training was over, he naturally had to be concerned about his harvest. After all, the main purpose of coming to the Azura arena was to earn Azura seals. Tempering himself was just a side benefit. After checking, Lu Yi raised his eyebrows. The harvest from this trip had exceeded his expectations. Right now, there were more than 150,000 Azura seals stored in the Azura token. Among them, 10,000 Azura seals were exchanged for by him using spirit jades. In other words, he had obtained more than 140,000 Azura seals during this experiential training. Calculating the time, it seemed that he had used less than 20 days. When cultivators participated in the experiential training, they would be rewarded with the most basic Azura seals for every day they stayed in the experiential training scene. This was information that all cultivators knew. Yu Yao's level was 2,000 Azura seals. In other words, as long as Lu Yi entered the experiential training scene, no matter what he did, even if he hid and didn't participate in any disputes, he would still be able to obtain 2,000 Azura seals a day. Of course, there was a reason for doing so. There was a great risk that it would attract the attention of the Azura arena. Who knew when some danger would suddenly descend? The constellation seemed to be 800, and the sunshine seemed to be 5,000. The basic reward for 20 days was 40,000 Azura seals. The extra was undoubtedly the reward given by the Azura arena based on Lu Ye's various performances this time. Not bad. Lu Yi was still very satisfied with this harvest. In his expectations, his harvest would be much lower than this number. After all, he didn't follow the instructions of the Azura arena this time. Instead, he followed his own instructions. It was his nature. He vaguely guessed that Yu Yaorao had given him that treasure at the last moment, which had greatly increased his harvest. This was because one of his missions was to seize this treasure. No matter how it came about, it was at the last moment. It was in his hands. No wonder cultivators flocked to the Azura arena like a flock of ducks. Earning 140,000 Azura seals in 20 days was equivalent to 1.4 million spirit jades. In other places, which cultivator could earn spirit jades with such a high efficiency? Of course, the Azura arena's experiential training was also very risky. It wasn't strange to have such a harvest. Not to mention Yu Yao, even if sunshine came here, he would have to be mentally prepared to die. 150,000 Azura seals wasn't a small amount, but compared to the resources he wanted to exchange for, it was nothing. In the Azura treasury, the cheapest Bodhi fruit was close to 230,000 Azura seals. The white moon crystals he had refined before were as high as 1 million. the Azura token suddenly vibrated. Lu Yi checked it and found that Yu Yaorao had sent a message, asking about the location of his cave. Lu Yi told her the truth. In less than half an hour, the Azura token vibrated again. After checking it, he found that it was Yu Yaorao again, and there were only two simple words. Open the door. Lu Yi opened the door to his cave. Sure enough, he saw Yu Yaorao standing outside with a smile like a flower. Her charming face coupled with her voluptuous figure was really a feast for the eyes. How did you get here so quickly? Lu Yi was stunned. The heavenly Azura realm was very big, but Yu Yaorao had only spent half an hour to get here. It was really puzzling. Yu Yaorao said, "My cave is not far away." Lu Yi understood. "Second uncle, you won't let me in?" Yu Yaorao blinked at him. "Don't be naughty." While speaking, Lu Yi took out the Azura command and shot a profound light at Yu Yaorao. This call of second uncle made him seem older by many years. Moreover, he dared to say that Yu Yaorao was definitely older than him. Yu Yaorao giggled, clasped her hands behind her back, and skipped into the cave. She looked around and said, "Your cave is too shabby. You don't even know how to take care of it." Lu Yi didn't reply. Gui had told him that the cave could be expanded, but before that, he had to ask for permission from the Azura field. Moreover, he had to pay a certain amount of Azura seals. Lu Yi didn't have the mood to do this. After all, this was just a temporary shelter for him. It was enough for him to have a stable environment. There were only a few simple pieces of furniture in the cave. They were all brought by Lu Yi himself. Yu Yaorao casually found a seat and sat down. The small cave was suddenly filled with a delicate fragrance, which made people intoxicated. Lu Yi thought for a moment. She was a guest, so he took out a tea set and started to cook. Then he chatted with Yu Yaorao. Lu Yi found it strange that she was in the Azura field. After asking, he learned that the Nine Mysteries galaxy where Yu Yaorao came from was similar to the Rainflower galaxy where Gui came from. They were both neighbors of the Azura star field. Therefore, when the cultivators of the Nine Mysteries galaxy reached a certain level of cultivation, they would come to the Azura field to train. They had a unique advantage in this aspect. It could be said that whether it was the Rainflower galaxy or the Nine Mysteries galaxy, the cultivators might not have been to the 10,000 Elephant Sea, but it was impossible for them not to have entered the Azura field. Yu Yaorao had obtained the Alpha Origin Spirit Light back then and used it to ascend to the constellation realm. Her future was limitless, so the Nine Mysteries galaxy naturally nurtured her with all kinds of cultivation resources. Her cultivation had also rapidly improved. She had come to the Azura field when she was at the mid-constellation realm. Compared to Lu Yi, who was a newcomer, she had spent a much longer time here. During this period, she had encountered many dangers, but they were all averted in the end. This time, it was the most thrilling because she had been thrown into the Yu Yao's training ground. She could only be a spectator during the training, unable to control her own orders. Yu Yaorao's face was filled with lingering fear when she talked about her experience. She held the teacup with both hands and said, "Fortunately, you came out at the critical moment. Otherwise, I'm afraid we would have suffered a calamity this time." Speaking of this, she suddenly became somewhat angry. She then looked at Lu Yi and said, "I've been waiting for you. You took action too late." Lu Yi blinked. "You were waiting for me? You knew I was in the same training ground as you?" Yu Yaorao sneered. "I didn't know you were my second uncle until you suddenly came out." Lu Yi was taken aback for a moment before he vaguely understood. "So you didn't call me second uncle casually? You really do have a second uncle?" Yu Yaorao stared blankly at Lu Yi. "Aren't you from Black Cloud?" Lu Yi said, "I'm the head of the Nine Heavens Star Pirate Gang." Their eyes met for a while, and Yu Yaorao didn't know whether to laugh or cry. "Then where's my second uncle?" How would Lu Yi know where his second uncle was? But it was only now that he understood that Yu Yaorao didn't call him second uncle casually. There really was such a person. He came from the Black Cloud continent and hid in a certain star pirate gang, waiting for an opportunity to act. In the end, he didn't show up because there was no need to show up. The reason why Yu Yaorao was waiting for her second uncle was because the old sect master of Black Cloud sect had secretly told her before he died that there was someone on her side in the Star Pirate Gang. This was her only chance of survival. In fact, there was a token between the two of them that could prove the true identity of her second uncle, but after Yu Yaorao saw Lu Yi, she naturally recognized him as her second uncle and didn't take out the token. Lu Yi was quite surprised when he learned about all this. On one hand, he followed his heart, and on the other hand, he took advantage of the situation after counterattacking Lei Guang, but he didn't expect to make such a mistake. But in any case, the result was good. Chapter 1905. Less than half a day later, Yu Yaorao left. Before leaving, she told Lu Yi the approximate location of her cave residence and asked him to remember to look for her when he had time. Lu Yi readily agreed. After sending Yu Yaorao away, Lu Yi calculated the time. It seemed that there were only about 10 days before the settlement of the battle list. Such a small amount of time shouldn't be enough for him to participate in another experiential learning, unless it was the simplest kind of fighting scene. Additionally, there was another rule in the Azura arena. After a training session, cultivators would not be able to participate in another training session for a short period of time. This period of time could be long or short. As for when they could start again, cultivators would be able to sense it through their Azura command. Since he couldn't participate in the experiential learning, Lu Yi just wanted to challenge the Yu Yao battlefield. Now that he was ranked 7th, he naturally couldn't be satisfied. His goal was the first place of the Yu Yao battle list. However, before he challenged, he still contacted Walnut first. After all, he had an agreement with her. Every time he participated in a battle in the battle list, she would place a bet on him and then reap the benefits. Half of the benefits would belong to him. Not long after the message was sent, he received a response. "You want to challenge now? Can you wait for 2 days? My experiential learning here is almost finished. Can you wait for me to go back and challenge again?" Lu Yi didn't expect that Walnut would also enter the experiential learning scene. Now, he didn't know where she was suffering, so he could only reply, "Don't die." If Walnut suddenly died, all his previous benefits would go down the drain. Only if this woman came back alive could he obtain the corresponding benefits. Since Walnut wasn't here, Lu Yi lost interest in continuing to challenge. Moreover, if he challenged at this time, he might not be able to fulfill his wish, because the cultivators ranked ahead of him might not have returned to the heavenly Azura field yet. Since that was the case, he would wait until 3 days before the settlement. Since he had nothing to do, he took out the ball-like treasure and carefully examined it, trying to pry into its mysteries. In the end, no matter what Lu Yi did, he couldn't find anything special about it. After thinking for a while, Lu Yi hit the ball-like treasure with his palm. He only patted it lightly and didn't use much strength at all. However, it was this palm that caused the ball to shatter. Lu Yi was stunned for a moment. If it could be destroyed so easily, then it was obviously not a treasure. However, the fact that there was no way to put it into a storage ring was very puzzling. But soon, Lu Yi saw a strange object in the pile of debris. It was a square object about the size of a baby's fist. It seemed to be carved out of crystal and looked like a magnified dice. However, there were no words on its surface. Instead, it was smooth. Lu Yi picked it up and examined it carefully. He couldn't see anything special about it, so he tried to put it into his storage ring but failed. He immediately understood that the ball-like thing was indeed not a treasure. The treasure was the die hidden within it. However, Lu Yi really couldn't figure out what this thing was for. He tried to channel his mana into it, but it didn't show any signs of being accepted. He probed with his divine sense, but there were no abnormalities. Suddenly, his mind stirred. Since this thing came from the training scene, then perhaps he could find an answer in the Azura's treasure trove. This was because there was a place in the Azura's treasure trove that would recycle rare and strange treasures. According to the value of the treasure, a cultivator would be rewarded with a certain number of Azura seals. Under normal circumstances, if a cultivator obtained a treasure they didn't recognize, they would go to that place to have a look. They wouldn't recycle it but rather have the Azura's treasure trove help them identify it. This was common knowledge. Therefore, in the Azura's treasure trove, it was very difficult for cultivators to pick up treasures. This was because no matter how rare or strange a treasure was, cultivators could use the Azura field to figure out its use and value. Lu Yi took out the Azura token, opened the door, and entered the treasure trove. With a thought, he arrived in an area. There were many empty cylinders here. Cultivators only needed to place treasures they couldn't identify on the cylinders, and they would be able to obtain specific information about the treasure and its value. There were quite a few cultivators here, all of them clearly having the same thoughts as Lu Yi. Some of them were ecstatic, clearly having obtained some good items. Others shook their heads and sighed, no doubt because the treasures they had placed their hopes on were nothing more than trash. Lu Yi found a secluded place and placed the die in his hand on the cylinder in front of him. In the next moment, a layer of dim light suddenly appeared and enveloped the die. At the same time, some information inexplicably appeared in Lu Ye's mind, undoubtedly from the Azura field. Die of Fate, the attribute of a supreme treasure. Seek fortune and avoid disaster. Defy the heavens and change one's fate. Lu Ye's eyebrows twitched. Without any hesitation, he grabbed the die in his hand again. He glanced around and found that no one was paying attention to him. The attribute of a supreme treasure. This strange die was actually the attribute of a supreme treasure. This was really a great bargain. As expected, I, Lu Yi, have always been kind to others. I love to help the weak and get rid of the strong. When I see injustice on the road, I draw my sword to help. This opportunity is well-deserved. Counting up, he had obtained 2 supreme treasures. The pill gourd had endless magical uses, refining spirit pills effortlessly, and the minor constellation hall could easily create a top-grade spiritual island in a place like the 10,000 Elephant Sea. The attribute of this die of fate was definitely not bad. Suppressing the excitement in his heart, Lu Yi held the die and sized it up. Now, with the help of the Azura field, he had figured out what this thing was. As for why this thing was in the Azura field, it was not difficult to understand. In the vast Azura field, countless cultivators had come and gone since ancient times. Some had great harvests, and naturally, some had died mysteriously. There were countless treasures of all kinds in the Azura field. If someone brought in a supreme treasure from the outside, it was natural that it would be lost in the Azura field after death. Moreover, before the heavenly Azura clan was exterminated, they had already invested a large amount of treasures in the Azura field. But how exactly was this thing to be used? Seek fortune and avoid disaster. Defy the heavens and change one's fate. It sounded very mysterious and unparalleled. Thinking about it, since it was a die, perhaps it should be. Lu Yi squatted down and threw the die into the open space in front of him. The die rolled a few times and flipped a few sides before stopping. Then, Lu Yi clearly saw that the face of the die that was facing up suddenly glowed, and a large word appeared. Auspicious. Lu Yi raised his eyebrows. Just as he was thinking that the meaning of this auspicious word should be good, the word suddenly turned into a ray of light and shot towards him. Caught off guard, Lu Yi didn't have time to dodge at all and was hit directly on the forehead by the light. His expression changed, and he hurriedly urged his strength to check his body, but found that he didn't feel anything. Even the talent tree in his body didn't react. But what made him feel strange was that at this moment, he clearly had a very strange feeling. This feeling was indescribable, but it was a very strong confidence that was born inexplicably. It seemed that no matter what difficulties were placed in front of him, he could easily solve them. Anything he wanted, he could plunder at will. This feeling was too strange, and Lu Yi couldn't get used to it for a while. But what was the use of this? Right now, there didn't seem to be any problems in front of him that needed to be solved. He did want the treasures of the Azura field, but that thing cost 10 billion Azura seals. Where would he get it? He couldn't say that the Azura field would be given to him for free. This was completely unreasonable. Suddenly, Lu Yi thought of a good place, and also a place where he could verify whether the dice of fate was useful or not. With a thought, his vision changed and he came to another area of the treasure house. There were storage rings placed on the pillars here. This was the place that Gui had warned him to stay away from, and it was also the area where cultivators liked to gamble. Many cultivators stayed and walked here, checking the storage rings one by one, trying to spy on which storage ring was worth a gamble, but they often lost completely. Lu Yi was actually not very interested in this place. Although there were precedents of getting rich overnight, and more than once, there were losses and there were wins. The final outcome of gamblers was only to lose everything. He only came here to verify whether the dice of fate was useful or not, and at this time, he really did have a very strong confidence that he would definitely be able to gamble for a very valuable storage ring. Just as he was looking around, a voice suddenly came from the side. "Fellow Taoist, choose this." Lu Yi turned his head to look and found that the person talking to him was an old man. At first glance, he looked a little familiar. After thinking carefully, he immediately remembered. This old man was the one who had shouted that it was finally his turn when he came here for the first time. That time, he should have hit the jackpot. The old man was obviously very experienced. Lu Yi humbly asked for advice. "What do you mean?" The old man had an unfathomable look. He stroked his beard and said, "There are many ways to judge the quality, judge the color, and gamble for luck. I can't explain it to you in a short time, but if you trust this old man, choose this." According to this old man's observation, this storage ring is most likely left behind by Rizhao. It won't let you down. This old man has no other request. If fellow Taoist can benefit from it, just give me a little bit. Lu Yi blinked. It didn't matter to him at all, so he reached out to grab the storage ring. The old man's eyes immediately overflowed with anticipation. But just as Lu Yi was about to grab the storage ring, he frowned, inexplicably feeling that there was something wrong with the dice of fate, so he pulled back his hand. "Fellow Taoist, you don't need to hesitate. The quality of this storage ring can't be wrong." The old man advised again. Lu Yi slowly shook his head. He had a feeling that choosing the storage ring would not be a good thing. Just as the old man was about to persuade him again, a person suddenly walked out from the side and grabbed the storage ring. The old man immediately beat his chest and stamped his feet. "Fellow Taoist, hesitating will only make you miss a good opportunity. If this old man didn't have the Azure seal, I would have definitely taken it. How could I let others take advantage of it? Young man, you don't listen to the old man's advice. You lose." Just as the old man finished speaking, a loud bang suddenly came from the side. Lu Yi quickly turned his head and saw the cultivator who had just exchanged for the storage ring standing in place with a dumbfounded expression. The storage ring he exchanged for had already exploded into pieces. After being stunned for a while, the cultivator cursed, "Fuck your ancestors." Lu Yi turned his head to look at the old man. The old man's expression didn't change. Some storage rings are too old. If you're not careful enough when unsealing them, something like this can happen. But that storage ring was definitely left behind by Rizhao. What a pity! If this old man had exchanged for it, he would definitely have successfully unsealed the seal. End of chapter. Chapter 1906. Hearing the old man's stubbornness, the cultivator who had just exchanged for the storage ring scolded him, "Old man, stop making a fool of yourself here. That storage ring is too old. It's not something that can be unsealed anymore. Just the slightest surge of magic power can make it explode. I really believed your bullshit and chose this unlucky bastard." The reason he had chosen the storage ring was undoubtedly because he had secretly heard the old man's persuasion to Lu Yi, but he hadn't expected to lose everything. Although 13,000 Azure seals wasn't much, it wasn't something to be wasted casually. The old man coldly snorted, "This old master didn't let you choose, you wanted to snatch it yourself, who can you blame?" The two immediately quarreled. Lu Yi was too lazy to pay attention to them and walked to the side, casually exchanging for a storage ring from a pillar, and after a brief inspection, a look of astonishment appeared on his face. Because he found that this storage ring actually didn't have a restriction lock. Without a restriction lock, it meant that he didn't need to unlock it and could take out the things inside at will. Taking a closer look, Yang Kai found that there were quite a lot of things inside the storage ring. Just the spirit jades and spirit crystals were piled up in a large area. There were also several good samples of magic weapons. Lu Yi didn't take them out for a closer look. After all, this wasn't the place to carefully inspect them, but he roughly estimated that the things inside the storage ring were worth about 30 million spirit jades. 13,000 Azure seals for 30 million spirit jades. This was undoubtedly a big profit. Was the dice of fate really useful? However, he soon discovered one thing. After exchanging for the storage ring, the strong sense of confidence he had just now disappeared without a trace. This undoubtedly meant that the mysterious blessing of the dice of fate had been exhausted when he exchanged for the storage ring. After thinking for a moment, Yang Kai left the area and found a deserted corner, took out the dice of fate, and threw it in front of him. Although he could roughly confirm that the dice of fate was useful after trying it out just now, he still needed to try it a few more times before he could get an accurate answer. Under his gaze, the dice of fate rolled a few times, and just like before, a faint light lingered on the side facing up and a large character quickly formed. Lu Ye's eyes trembled when he saw this. Because it was the word, fierce. Just a moment ago, it was lucky, and now it was suddenly ominous. The reversal of fortune was a little too much. The Xiong character turned into a ray of light and shot towards him. Lu Yi was already prepared and dodged, but how could he dodge? The ray of light seemed to have a mind of its own as it drew an arc and accurately hit his forehead. Lu Yi felt as if he had been struck by lightning. He stood in place, his expression uncertain. Because at this moment he suddenly felt a little uneasy, as if something bad was about to happen. At this moment, a figure rushed towards him from a short distance away. Judging from the surging waves of magic power emanating from the other party's body, this was a late-stage moon-jade cultivator. However, at this moment, this cultivator's expression was very flustered. It was unknown what had happened to him. As soon as he saw Lu Yi standing in place, he rushed straight towards him and reached out to grab him. Lu Yi frowned. He had never imagined that he would encounter such bad luck. In this Heaven Azura realm, no matter where a cultivator was, they were not allowed to fight. That was why there were cultivators from all over the starry sky gathered here. This was the rule of the heavenly Azura realm. As long as a cultivator still had some sense, they wouldn't violate this rule. Lu Ye's first thought was that this person had lost his mind and dared to attack him here. However, he quickly rejected this thought. Because from the other party's expression, he could see panic and fear. He hadn't lost his mind. He raised his hand and grasped the hilt of the mountain plate saber. However, before he could strike, a ray of profound light descended from the sky and enveloped the cultivator. The charging cultivator's figure suddenly stiffened, as if he had been struck by a body-freezing curse. The fear on his face almost materialized. A horrifying scene appeared. Enveloped by the mysterious light, the cultivator's entire body began to melt like a burning candle. Even his clothes and storage ring were melting away at the same time. In the span of 3 breaths, a living late-stage heavenly Azura realm cultivator had mysteriously disappeared before Lu Ye's eyes, not leaving behind a single trace. Lu Yi still maintained his posture of holding the saber. When he looked down, he saw that a corner of his clothes was missing. This was undoubtedly the result of the profound light. He blinked and quickly bent down to pick up the dice of fate. Then, with a thought, he returned to his cave abode. It was indeed very fierce. There was no need to verify anything. At this time, it was not suitable for him to continue strolling outside. It was safer to hide in his cave abode. However, at this moment, he realized something. That cultivator had undoubtedly violated some rule and was mercilessly killed by the heavenly Azura realm. Perhaps he had signed an Azura contract with someone and didn't abide by it. Or perhaps there was some other reason. It was just that the other party had appeared in front of him and inexplicably attacked him. Perhaps he was unwilling to die and wanted to drag someone down with him. However, this was none of his business. Moreover, he hadn't attacked just now. He had only assumed a defensive posture, so he hadn't violated any of the rules of the heavenly Azura realm. Naturally, that kind of obliteration wouldn't befall him. Lu Yi sat down cross-legged and immersed his consciousness into investigating. The talent tree was burning fiercely, and a large amount of gray fog rose into the air. Something formless was being incinerated. Lu Yi guessed that this was the mysterious power that the dice of fate had bestowed upon him. The talent tree hadn't reacted the first time because the first blessing was a good thing for him, so the talent tree hadn't reacted. However, the second blessing was an ominous one, so the talent tree had reacted. Last time, The chains formed by the Azura contract had been incinerated by the talent tree. It had taken several days. Lu Yi estimated that it wouldn't be completed so quickly this time. However, in comparison, the Azura contract was a bit of the power of a supreme treasure, and his dice of fate was only a subordinate treasure of a supreme treasure. Compared to a real supreme treasure, it was undoubtedly much worse. Therefore, the time it would take shouldn't be longer than last time. Lu Yi secretly decided that before the talent tree had incinerated the power of the dice of fate, he would absolutely not leave his nest. 3 days later, Walnut sent a message to Lu Yi, informing him that he had finished his experiential learning and had returned to the heavenly Azura realm. He could start the challenge at any time. Lu Yi asked her to wait because the power of the dice of fate hadn't been completely incinerated. If he participated in the heavenly Azura realm in this state, who knew what kind of bad things would happen? During this period, Yu Yaorao came to look for him again, but was even rejected by Lu Yi. This made Yu Yaorao very unhappy. She stood outside the door and pouted for a long time before leaving. Several days later, Lu Yi confirmed that his body was fine. That bad feeling had disappeared without a trace. Only then did he send a message to Walnut. This dice of fate. It was better to use it less in the future. Although it was a subordinate treasure of a supreme treasure, there were too many uncontrollable factors. What made Lu Yi the most speechless was that this thing couldn't be put into a storage ring. Even the little flower realm couldn't store it. Helpless, Lu Yi could only find a rope to wrap it around his waist and hang it as a pendant. Today was the 3rd day before the ranking list of the heavenly Azura realm was settled. Those cultivators who were determined to fight for the ranking list had returned to the heavenly Azura realm early. If they didn't come back at this time, if they were challenged, they would automatically lose. The cultivators at the bottom of the ranking list didn't matter. Their ranking didn't increase by much, so their rewards wouldn't change too much. However, those at the top of the ranking list would definitely return. Lu Yi checked his ranking and was shocked to find that his ranking had actually reached the 5th place. The names of the 2 cultivators who had been ranked in front of him had disappeared at some point. This undoubtedly meant that the 2 of them were either dead or had left the Azura realm. Lu Yi couldn't help but think of the person he had met in the treasury that day who had been obliterated by the Azura realm. That person's cultivation was at the late stage of Yu Yao. Could that person be one of them? Regardless, it had nothing to do with him. Lu Yi directly issued a challenge to the person in 4th place. To his surprise, not long after the challenge was issued, the person's ranking directly rose by 1. It seemed that the person hadn't returned from the training grounds yet. This was a common occurrence. They must have been delayed by the training grounds. However, as long as the person hurried back before the time limit, they still had a chance to reclaim their ranking. He had no choice but to challenge the person in 3rd place. At the same time, in a cave in the heavenly Azura realm, a stone cultivator was lying on a bed. Beside him, another stone cultivator was urging his power to heal his injuries. Judging from the other's magic power fluctuations, it was a sunshine cultivator. The stone cultivator wasn't proficient in the art of healing. This was due to the limitations of his physique. However, the stone cultivator lying on the bed had suffered an extremely strange injury. It wasn't a problem that could be cured with simple medical skills. It required a powerful force to suppress and remove it. Sunshine's stone cultivator was currently suppressing and removing the strange injury from his disciple's body. He had already stayed here for 10 days and was about to resolve it. At this moment, the stone cultivator lying on the bed said, "Elder, someone wants to challenge me." Sunshine's stone cultivator withdrew his magic power. He nodded and said, "Then go. However, don't use too much strength. The energy lingering around your injury is very strange. Although it's almost resolved, if you continue to use too much strength, it might worsen." The stone cultivator on the bed stood up and nodded. "I understand. Elder, don't worry. It won't take long. I'll be back soon." He wanted to see which blind bastard dared to challenge him. This was something he hadn't encountered in a long time. If it were any other time, he would definitely be very interested. However, he was being disturbed at a critical moment in his recovery. This undoubtedly annoyed him. He secretly decided to teach the challenger a lesson. One had to know that in the battle arena on Yu Yao's level, he had the title of eternal third place. In the huge battle arena, there were hundreds of thousands of people on Yu Yao's level. To be able to occupy third place for so many years showed how strong he was. First watch today, I have something to do outside. Chapter 1907. In the spectator stands of the battle arena, Walnut and her master had followed Lu Ye's message and entered this place. They immediately saw Lu Yi preparing for battle below. When she turned to look at Lu Ye's opponent, Walnut couldn't help but be startled. Why is he challenging the third-ranked person? According to the information she had, Lu Yi was only ranked 7th on the Yu Yao battle roll. Thus, he should be challenging the 6th-ranked person this time. However, for some reason, the gap was so large that he had skipped quite a few people in one go. She checked the information on this third-ranked person and immediately remembered. It's the Shi tribe's Tian Yen. She had never seen Tian Yen before, but she had heard of his great name. This was because he had the title of Eternal Third in the Yu Yao battle arena. In other words, he had always maintained his third rank in the Yu Yao battle arena. It had been many years, and his rank hadn't risen, nor had it fallen. This was because he had defeated all the cultivators who had challenged him, and he didn't have the ability to defeat the 2 people ranked above him. Thus, he had always maintained his third rank. Master, which side should we place our bet on? Walnut was a little troubled. Although she thought very highly of Lu Yi based on the results of the previous battles, Tian Yen wasn't an ordinary Yu Yao. If he didn't have some strength, he wouldn't have been able to maintain his title of Eternal Third. Walnut wasn't sure whether Lu Yi was a match for Tian Yen. If she placed the wrong bet, her Azura seal would be reduced to nothingness. She naturally had to be cautious. When the woman heard this, she said, "Since we're going to bet, then let's bet big. We'll bet everything on that Lu Yi." Walnut was worried. "But master, no buts." The woman cut her off and said earnestly, "Little Walnut, I've taught you for so many years, yet you still don't understand. The most important thing in gambling is the process. Don't think about the results. If you think too much, you won't have the fun of gambling." Walnut cursed in her heart. It's precisely because of this that you often lose everything you have. However, she knew her master's temperament. Since she had decided to place her bet on Lu Yi, this undoubtedly meant that even her master didn't think highly of Lu Yi. Thus, she could enjoy the nervousness and excitement of waiting for the results. Should she place her bet on Tian Yen? In this way, no matter who won, one of them would be able to reap some benefits. Just as he was thinking this, his gaze suddenly landed on the battle arena below. Tian Yan's expression was a little strange. At this moment, Lu Yi was casually standing in the middle of the sealed battle arena. Looking left and right, she saw Walnut and her disciple and nodded at them. In the distance, Tian Yan's state was a little strange. He was currently staring at Lu Yi with his eyes wide open, looking somewhat suspicious, then shocked, then fearful, and finally revealing a strange expression as if he had stepped in feces when he came out of the door. This was because he recognized Lu Yi as the one who had beaten him up in the previous training scene. For a moment, he did not dare to believe his eyes. Based on his previous speculation, the head of the 9 heavens, Lu Yi, was definitely a shadow left behind by a monstrous genius of a certain era. In the entire Azura realm, only those 2 fellows could surpass him in strength. There was no one else. They had been suppressing him for so many years, so it was impossible for another one to appear out of nowhere. Only now did he realize that one had appeared out of nowhere. Compared to those 2, the pressure this Lu Yi from the 9 heavens gave him did not seem to be any weaker. If that was all, it would be fine. Tian Yan's strength was not bad, and this battle arena was protected by the rules that prevented death. Even if he was not a match for his opponent, he would not shrink back. No matter what, he would fight with all his strength and show the might of his stone clan. But this Lu Yi was not only strong, but his methods were also disgusting. The wound he had inflicted on him in the previous training scene had been lingering with a strange power. Even if he was from the Stone Clan, he could not heal it on his own. In the end, he had no choice but to find an elder from his clan to help suppress and remove it. He had been busy for 10 days. If he was injured by him again in battle, wouldn't he have to continue healing? He had been disgusted recently. With great difficulty, he was about to recover from his injuries. He did not want to experience that kind of terrible experience again. Moreover, how precious was Sunshine's time? How could he let his clan's elder keep healing him? This battle could not be fought. 30 breaths of preparation time quickly passed. Only then did Lu Yi turn to look at his opponent. The moment he regained his freedom, he rushed forward. Suddenly, he felt a little strange. Because this opponent of his seemed a little familiar? Before he could see clearly, his opponent's figure suddenly disappeared. Lu Yi subconsciously thought that his opponent was a ghost cultivator and used a method to hide his figure. But soon he realized that something was wrong. Because his vision blurred, he had returned to his own cave. Lu Yi was stunned. In the battle arena, the battle that countless cultivators were looking forward to actually ended just as it started. Walnut, whose face was full of nervousness, was stunned for a moment, then hurriedly checked her Azura command. When she saw that the Azura command had suddenly increased by a lot, she could not help but jump up. I won. She had placed her bet on Lu Yi at the last moment because she could tell that Tian Yan's expression wasn't quite right. Gritting her teeth, she steeled her heart and placed her bet on Lu Yi. This time, she had earned a lot. Because in the entire battle arena, apart from the master and disciple pair, only a few people had placed their bets on Lu Yi. Most of them had placed their bets on the more famous Tian Yan. According to the rules of the winners splitting the losers' bets, the profits obtained from this battle were undoubtedly very considerable. Especially since she had bet all of her assets, her ratio far exceeded that of the others. The woman frowned. Although winning the bet made her happy, Tian Yan actually retreated without fighting. This inevitably made people feel strange. There was no danger to one's life in the battle arena. If Tian Yan had no intention of fighting, he could have completely refused Lu Ye's challenge. This way, the ranking would directly change. Since he had accepted the challenge, why would he take the initiative to admit defeat? Even the woman, who was bright and quick-witted, could not figure out why Tian Yan would do this. The entire battle arena boiled over. Countless cultivators loudly cursed shady deals, secret deals, and the like, requesting the Azura field to uphold justice. These cultivators who had placed their bets on Tian Yan felt that they had lost too unjustly. Moreover, there had never been such a precedent of retreating without fighting in the battle arena, let alone this kind of thing happening to the third-ranked Tian Yan. This made people wonder if Tian Yan and that Lu Yi had some kind of secret deal. Both sides cooperated to control the results of the battle, using this to amass wealth. If there really was such a thing, the Azura field would definitely not sit by and do nothing. As long as someone brought it up, the Azura field would deal with it strictly. However, what disappointed people was that no matter how fiercely they shouted, Lu Yi and Tian Yan's rankings still remained on the ranking, not erased. In Tian Yan's cave, he suddenly appeared and returned. The Sunshine Rock tribe member nodded and said, "You won." As for Tian Yan's victory, he was not at all surprised. In the entire Azura field's Yuyao level, aside from those two, no one could be stronger than Tian Yan. This time, he wondered who was so blind to challenge him. Tian Yan's expression was blank. He scratched his face and said, "I lost." The Sunshine Rock tribe member was shocked. How could that be? Moreover, to be able to defeat Tian Yan in such a short time, even those two could not do it, right? Based on the time, Tian Yan had been defeated in 2 or 3 moves after entering the battle arena. What kind of person had such powerful strength? "Elder, it was that guy who challenged me." Tian Yan's expression was gloomy. The Sunshine Rock tribe member said in surprise, "The person who injured you previously? That's him." Tian Yan nodded heavily. "I originally thought that he was a shadow left behind by a monster from some era, but I never thought that he was not. He is from this era, so I did not fight him. I admitted defeat and withdrew." The Sunshine Rock tribe member nodded and said, "A wise decision. It was not embarrassing to lose. Cultivators who trained in the battle arena would not be afraid of winning or losing. The key was that the injury caused by the other party's long blade was too disgusting. This was the reason why Tianyan withdrew. How can there be such a person in this world? Tianyan was puzzled. The Sunshine Rock tribe member said, "You are content to stay in a corner, forever only able to see the sky above your head. It is not a bad thing to experience some setbacks on the road of growth. You still have a long way to go in the future. A temporary dispute does not mean anything." "I understand, Elder." Tianyan was not someone who could not accept defeat. He thought for a moment and said, "I have never heard of this guy before. He should have just come to the Azura field not long ago. Looking at his momentum, he is probably aiming for the top spot. He will definitely challenge those two. Elder, I want to watch the battle. Can I delay the treatment of my injuries for a while?" "Of course." The Sunshine Rock tribe member agreed. "Thank you, Elder." In Lu Ye's cave, he checked his ranking and found that he had reached the 3rd place. There were only 2 people in front of him. He focused his attention on the basic information of these 2 people. He found that the person in the top spot was Gu Sheng from the Yellow Dragon realm. Below Gu Sheng was a cultivator from the ancient barbarian realm called Abdullah. Lu Ye's heart skipped a beat. The Yellow Dragon realm was indeed worthy of its reputation. He could hear the name of this realm everywhere he went. On the Wanxiang Sea, there was the Yellow Dragon Island, which was famous for its fighting prowess. The top spot in the battle arena was also a cultivator from the Yellow Dragon realm. It was indeed one of the top realms in the starry sky. It was full of talents. He knew a little about the ancient barbarian realm. It was a very strange realm. Generally speaking, the realms of various sizes in the starry sky would be affected by the changes in the overall environment, and then some changes would occur. Perhaps these changes would be very small and unnoticeable, but over a long period of time, these accumulated changes would be very big. This was also the reason why the current cultivation environment was completely different from that of the ancient barbarian realm. Only the starry sky wonders that were born in ancient times maintained the characteristics of ancient times. The ancient barbarian realm was special in that it had the characteristics of a starry sky wonder. It did not seem to be affected by the changes in the overall environment. The entire realm maintained the appearance and environment of ancient times. End of chapter. Chapter 1908. The special environment of the ancient barbarian world made the cultivators of this world maintain the most ancient cultivation method. And there was only one race in this world, and that was the barbarian race. Lu Yi had never seen a real barbarian race before, but according to what he knew, the barbarian race's appearance was not much different from the human races, but as a whole, their bodies were several times bigger than the human races. Moreover, they were most proficient in the way of tattooing, which was a battle method passed down from ancient times. If not for the barbarian race's difficulty in reproduction and their small population, they would definitely be a famous race in the starry sky. Moreover, their lifespan seemed to be much shorter than the cultivators of other races, which seemed to be caused by the environment of the ancient barbarian world. Even with the barbarian race's cultivation method, there was no way to change this. Now, he was ranked 3rd, and according to the rules, he could only challenge Abdullah, unless Abdullah was not in the heavenly Azura world. Just as he was about to challenge Abdullah, his Azura token moved, and he immediately checked it. He thought it was Walnut, but it turned out to be Yu Yaorao's message. She sounded very surprised. "You defeated Tianyan?" Lu Yi thought that the news spread really fast. He had just won the battle, and Yu Yaorao already knew about it. Could it be that she happened to be watching the battle in the arena just now? However, after asking, he found out that this was not the case. Yu Yaorao just happened to check the ranking of the Yu Yao battle arena and found that Tianyan's name was pushed down by Lu Ye's, so she asked, "Good fight." Yu Yaorao seems to have some prejudice against Tianyan. Previously, during the training, those pirate gangs were gathered by him. Lu Yi suddenly realized why he felt Tianyan was somewhat familiar. He's the chief of Thunderlight Gang? The main reason was that Tianyan ran too fast, so he didn't have time to carefully size him up, otherwise, he would definitely recognize him. He was wondering why Yu Yao, who was ranked third, retreated without a fight. It turned out that she had already fought with him before. It's him! Yu Yao gnashed her teeth. I was scared to death by him. Lu Yi was about to reply when another message came. This time, it was from Walnut. She obviously knew that Lu Yi would not stop at the third place and would soon challenge Abdullah and Gu Sheng, so she sent him some information about these two people. Just as he finished reading Walnut's message, a third message came in. This time, it was from Gui. She also sent some information about Abdullah and Gu Sheng. She and Lu Yi were both Yu Yao. 3 days before the battle rankings were released, she must have been busy ranking as well. It wasn't surprising that she had noticed the change in Lu Ye's ranking. Moreover, she was the one who had brought Lu Yi into the Azura arena. Naturally, she knew that Lu Yi lacked information about the top 2 rankers of the Yu Yao rankings. She had taken the initiative to send Lu Yi a message so that he wouldn't be at a disadvantage in the battle. Lu Yi felt very busy. First, he thanked Guy, then he sent a message to Walnut. Only then did he have the time to talk to Yu Yao. If you want to continue challenging them, you have to be careful. I heard that the top 2 on the Yu Yao ranking are ridiculously strong. Tian Yen has been challenging them but has never succeeded. I have a slight understanding of it. Lu Yi replied. Regardless of whether it was Walnut or Gui Yi's information, they had indirectly confirmed the strength of these two. It was also at this moment that Lu Yi finally understood why Gu Sheng and Abdullah's victory rate wasn't high. When he had looked at the information about these two, he had felt it was very strange. This was undoubtedly somewhat abnormal for the top 2 rankers of the Yu Yao rankings. Only now did he know that all of their defeats were bestowed upon each other. There was a rumor in the Yu Yao battlefield. That was, Gu Sheng and Abdullah were in the first rank, Tian Yen was in the second rank, and those 3 were in the third rank. Ever since Gu Sheng and Abdullah had occupied the top 2 rankers of the Yu Yao rankings, no one had ever shaken their rankings. The only ones who could change their rankings were themselves. This had also directly led to Tian Yan's title as the eternal third ranker. Every time before the Yu Yao battlefield's results were released, Gu Sheng and Abdullah would have a battle. Both of them had won and lost. This time, Lu Yi saw that Gu Sheng was ranked first. However, the previous time, it was Abdullah. Perhaps it was Gu Sheng before that. Therefore, every time 3 days before the Yu Yao rankings results were released, the Yu Yao battlefield would be extremely lively. Countless cultivators would enter the battlefield to watch the battle between these two. Every battle between them dazzled the eyes of the spectators and caused them to gasp in amazement. As usual, there were many cultivators waiting for their battle to begin. While Lu Yi was busy communicating with the girls, outside a cave in the heavenly Azura realm, a tall and sturdy man wearing a beast skin cloak stood still. He looked like an iron tower. This person's chest was bare, and there was a tattoo of a roaring tiger's head engraved on his chest. It was very lifelike. His hair was shaved, and there was only a small patch of long hair at the back of his head that was braided into a small braid. He raised his large hand and slammed it heavily on the door of the cave in front of him. Instantly, banging sounds could be heard from the cave. He shouted, "Gu Sheng, open the door." An angry voice immediately came from inside. "There's no one at home." The tall and sturdy man grinned. "Stop talking nonsense and open the door. Grandpa is here to see you." He continued banging on the door. The owner of the cave was helpless. He knew that if he didn't let this barbarian in, he would only continue to chatter. He opened the door and looked at him with disdain. "What are you doing here?" The owner of the cave didn't look very old. Most importantly, he was extremely beautiful with fair skin. If one didn't listen to him and didn't have the physical characteristics that a woman should have, anyone who saw him would think that he was a peerless beauty. In fact, in terms of appearance alone, his appearance was indeed far superior to most so-called beauties. However, those who knew him definitely wouldn't let their imaginations run wild because of his appearance. This was because he was one of the top experts in the Yu Yao realm, whose name shook the entire Azura realm. He was Gu Sheng from the Yellow Dragon realm. The tall and sturdy man who came to see him was the barbarian tribe's Abro from the ancient barbarian realm. In the Azura realm, many people only knew that these two would fight once every 2 months. It was extremely intense, as if they had some irreconcilable grudge. However, very few people knew that the two of them were actually very close in private. Gu Sheng stood in front of Abro. His height barely reached his chest. Moreover, for some reason, Gu Sheng's face was extremely pale, without a single trace of blood. He had a sickly beauty to him. From afar, this scene gave off a strange feeling of a tiger sniffing a rose. "Grandpa is here to see if you're dead or not." Abro looked Gu Sheng up and down. "What happened, little brother? I heard that you were heavily injured during your training? What a rare thing." Gu Sheng snorted coldly. Injuries were common during training. However, he had suffered a bit too much this time and almost didn't return alive. "Are you done looking? Then scram." As he spoke, he was about to close the door when Abro hurriedly said, "Since I'm already here, aren't you going to invite me in?" Gu Sheng said, "There's no wine or food in the house. It's inconvenient to entertain guests." Abro flipped his hand and took out a wine bottle. He chuckled and said, "I brought my own." Gu Sheng looked at him with a helpless expression and gritted his teeth. "You barbarian." He couldn't refuse because even if he refused the other party, Abro wouldn't let him go so easily. He could only take out the Azura token and shoot a profound light at him to let him in. It was clearly not Abro's first time here. Although the cave was large, he was very familiar with the place. He took the lead and walked into the bedroom. Then he pointed at the jade bed beside him and said, "Take off your clothes and lie on it." Gu Sheng's face trembled and became much paler. He stood still and said warily, "What are you doing?" Abro turned to look at him and patted the wine bottle he had brought. "Do you think I'm really here to drink with you? This is a medicinal wine specially made by my barbarian race. With the help of my race's secret healing method, I guarantee that you'll recover from your injuries in 3 days. Hurry up and heal my injuries. If you fight with me, I don't want others to say that I have an unfair advantage." "No need." Gu Sheng's expression changed greatly. Even when he was in danger during his training, he wasn't as panicked as he was now. Although he knew that the barbarian race's secret healing method and their special medicinal wine were very effective, he had tried it before and still had some lingering fear. "What nonsense are you spouting?" Abdullah slapped Gu Sheng's shoulder, causing him to bend down. Then he grabbed him and threw him onto the bed. While doing so, he tore off his outer clothes. "I'll do it myself." Seeing Abro walk towards him step by step with a fierce glint in his eyes, Gu Sheng knew that he couldn't refuse and hurriedly shouted. After a short while, Gu Sheng lay on the bed in his underwear. Abro's 2 large hands were like red-hot iron, turning into afterimages as they slapped Gu Sheng's body. The slapping sounds were very rhythmic. Gu Sheng's face was blood red, and his expression was one of suffering that was worse than death. There was no other reason. As Abro activated the barbarian race's secret healing method, his blood and chi were surging out of his control. The feeling was very uncomfortable. Abro, however, said with interest, "Brat, you must have reincarnated into the wrong body. Your body and skin are better than all the women I've seen." Gu Sheng's face was red, and his heart was filled with humiliation. He cursed loudly, "Are you crazy?" Just as he finished speaking, he spat out a mouthful of blood. The blood was pitch black. Abro snickered. "See, I told you not to talk when you're healing. You've suffered retribution, haven't you?" Gu Sheng immediately shut his mouth and pretended that he was already dead. Suddenly, Abro's movement stopped, and his tone was surprised. "Someone actually challenged me?" After saying that, he continued slapping and muttered to himself, "Forget it, let him wait for a while. I'm afraid that Brat Tianyan is itching for a beating again." The only one who could challenge him now was Tianyan. Although Tianyan's strength was not as good as his and Gu Sheng's, he had a tenacity. He kept on fighting despite repeated defeats. Who knew how many times he had suffered at the hands of Abro and Gu Sheng's hands? However, whenever he had the chance, he would still challenge them. What a cultivator needed the most was this kind of indomitable spirit, So Abro did not underestimate Tianyan just because he was not his match. End of chapter. Chapter 1909. After a while, Abdullah stood up and said to Gu Sheng, who was still lying on the bed, "Good grandson, lie down. Grandpa will be back soon." After saying this, his burly figure suddenly disappeared. Sensing that he had already entered the battle arena, Gu Sheng grimaced in pain and wailed, his expression filled with extreme pain. But then again, the special medicinal wine of the barbarian race was supplemented by their special healing methods, and the effect was indeed remarkable. In just a short period of time, the injuries he had suffered before were already showing signs of improvement. Abdullah said that he would be able to recover in 3 days, and it was not empty talk. But when he thought about how this pain would last for 3 days, Gu Sheng felt that there was nothing left to live for. He was most afraid of pain. In the battle arena, Lu Yi and Abdullah's figures appeared in the enclosed battle arena at the same time. Lu Yi raised his eyes and looked at the number on the screen, then sent a message to Walnut. Only then did he begin to size up his opponent. At a glance, he found that the barbarian race was just like the rumors said. The barbarian race did not look much different from the human race, except that they were enlarged several times. Abdullah's figure was extremely tall and sturdy, and he was wearing an animal skin cloak. On his exposed chest was a lifelike roaring tiger's head, and he was standing there picking his nose casually. But soon, Abdullah's expression froze, because he found that his opponent this time was not the familiar Tianyan. Who was this? His eyes widened to the size of copper bells, and he seriously sized up Lu Ye's figure, confirming that he had never seen this person before. This was strange. Although there would be newcomers in the Azura battle arena from time to time, it was rare to see someone suddenly appear like this. Only then did he remember to check his Azura token, because if Lu Yi challenged him, the Azura token would have recorded the information. After a while, Abdullah showed an interested expression, because he found that his opponent's battle record was astonishingly beautiful. So far, he had experienced more than 200 battles and had not lost a single one. This undoubtedly meant one thing. This human was indeed a newcomer to the Azura battle arena, and he had made great progress in the Yuyao battle arena, fighting his way to 3rd place, and had the qualifications to stand in front of him. Unfortunately, he did not know what his name was, because Lu Yi had hidden his name and origin in the battle arena, so Abdullah naturally could not see it. All he could see was Lu Ye's battle record. Abdullah's eyes lit up. To be honest, Gu Sheng was indeed a very good opponent. Every time they crossed swords, he would have to go all out. However, in this huge Azura arena, if there was only one opponent, it would be a little too boring. Just like this time, when he heard that Gu Sheng was heavily injured, he had to personally run over to treat him. Otherwise, he would not be able to fight in the future. If there were a few more opponents like Gu Sheng in the Azura arena, why would he need to be so worried? And this human soldier cultivator in front of him was able to defeat Tianyan. His strength should be pretty good. The 30 breaths of preparation time quickly passed. The number of people in the originally sparse grandstand rapidly increased. The competition between the top few people in the fighting arena would always attract the attention of many people. Under the call of friends, the seats in the grandstand were quickly filled. The moment the power binding the two sides suddenly disappeared, 2 huge waves of air erupted under Lu Yi and Abdullah's feet, and the two quickly rushed towards each other. In the blink of an eye, they collided. Without any warning or foreshadowing, Lu Yi swung his blade down, and Abdullah raised his fist to meet it. With a loud boom, the shattered transcendence energy of the collision swept out in all directions. The two figures instantly went from extreme motion to extreme stillness. In just a moment of deadlock, the two involuntarily leaned back, and then their bodies fell back down. A second collision erupted. Then a third, a fourth. Cries of surprise rang out from the spectators in the stands. Such a violent and direct confrontation was rare in a battle between cultivators. Not to mention, it was an evenly matched battle. Although the spectators were unable to truly experience the danger of the battle due to the isolation of the battle arena, they could tell that this was Yu Yao's ultimate clash just by looking at the shockwaves from the battle between the two of them. No one had ever been able to fight Abdullah without being at a disadvantage in a direct confrontation. Lu Ye's mountain plate blade had already turned into an afterimage, and Abdullah's fists had also turned into a rain of punches. Strangely, in such a terrifying and intense confrontation, the two of them did not move in the slightest. Whether it was the tall and sturdy Abdullah or the short Lu Yi, their bodies seemed to be nailed to the ground. Haha. In the midst of this intense confrontation, Abdullah couldn't help but laugh heartily. His laughter was filled with delight, as if a wild beast that had been bound for countless years had finally broken free. The momentum of his punches became even more ferocious and astonishing. But what made him ecstatic was that no matter how ferocious his punches were, this human weapon cultivator was actually able to withstand them. In a short 10 breaths of time, after countless clashes, the two of them finally broke away from the deadlock and drifted back. Standing still, Abdullah's blood and chi surged as he stared at Lu Yi with a scorching gaze. He shouted, "Awesome, awesome. You're so much stronger than that stone block Tian Yen. No wonder you could beat him." In the grandstand, Tian Yen, who had come to spectate after receiving the news, almost cursed out loud. "If you want to fight, then fight. Why drag me into this? What did I do to provoke you?" Abdullah was still in an excited state. "It looks like I'll have another opponent in this Azura arena in the future." And it was an opponent that was very much to his liking. In comparison, Gu Sheng was simply a pile of shit. It wasn't that Gu Sheng wasn't strong enough, but because Gu Sheng was a spell cultivator. When he, a brute, fought with Gu Sheng kept jumping around, making him feel like he was chasing a rabbit. He simply couldn't experience the exhilaration of a battle of pure strength. All of a sudden, the smile on Abdullah's face turned into madness, and he looked like he was excited to see a prey. As his chi and blood surged, his already burly body seemed to have collided again, and his eyes were filled with a ferocious light. "Then let's enjoy this battle to the fullest." The moment he finished speaking, he pounced towards Lu Yi again. Although he was big and in terms of cultivation system, he should be a body cultivator, but he had a speed that ordinary body cultivators simply didn't have. This was the uniqueness of the brute race's cultivation system. In the entire galaxy, there was no other cultivator who came from the ancient brute world. As he ran, the lifelike tiger head on his chest suddenly bloomed with light. At the same time, veined patterns lit up all over his body, and his tall and sturdy figure rapidly changed. It's coming, Savage Beast 9 transformations." An excited voice rang out from the stands. The person who spoke clearly had some understanding of Abdullah's background. The Savage Beast 9 transformations he spoke of was the brute race's secret technique that Abdullah cultivated. It was also what he relied on to fight against his opponent. In the entire Yu Yao battle arena, there were only two people who could use the Savage Beast 9 transformations for him. One was his sworn enemy, Gu Sheng, and the other was Tian Yen. However, Tian Yen was still too weak. Under normal circumstances, once Abdullah used this secret technique, Tian Yen would lose. This was the huge gap between the two Yu Yao. Abdullah's figure was still in human form when he moved, but as he ran, his flesh, blood, and bones were wriggling and transforming rapidly. By the time he arrived in front of Lu Yi, he had transformed into a ferocious and terrifying giant tiger with black and white fur that was more than 15 meters long. In the primordial era, living beings didn't have good cultivation methods. In order to deal with the attacks of the ancient beasts, the brute race ancestors of the ancient brute world studied the forms of the ancient beasts and created the first savage beast transformations. The brute race's Tao of tattoos also became popular at that time, because if one wanted to use the savage beast transformations, they had to supplement it with the Tao of tattoos. It was because of the brute race's ancestors that the brute race was able to survive in the harsh environment of the ancient times and pass it down to the present day. This was a secret technique unique to the brute race, and it was difficult for cultivators of any other race to cultivate it. Roar! The tiger's roar rang out, and visible ripples spread out in all directions. It was obvious that the roar wasn't just loud. Lu Yi, who bore the brunt of the attack, immediately sensed that the tiger's roar had a mind-sucking effect. He was all too familiar with this. Hoopa also had this kind of divine power. When he was still weak, he and Hoopa had teamed up to kill enemies, and it was Hoopa's roar that drew the curtains to the battle. He could clearly feel his soul's defensive barrier being attacked, and then, there was no then. This mind-sucking roar would often have a miraculous effect if it was used against someone with a weaker soul than the caster, but if it was used against someone with a stronger soul, then it would only be loud. Lu Ye's soul had never been weak. Since the beginning of his cultivation, he had refined many treasures that could increase his soul power, which directly led to him forming a spirit sea when he was still in the true lake realm. Many years ago, he also obtained the rainbow god lotus, which had the effect of nourishing the soul. Even if Lu Yi didn't do anything, it would constantly nourish his soul and strengthen his soul power. Therefore, this tiger's roar was like a gentle breeze to Lu Ye's ears. The tiger's roar was only a test, and the real killing move followed. The tiger that Abro transformed into pounced down, and 2 washbasin-sized claws shone with a cold light. As it swung down, it opened its mouth and bit towards Lu Yi. That bloody mouth bared its fangs, and if one were to be bitten, half of one's body would be gone. Under such a ferocious attack, the hearts of countless cultivators in the stands rose to their throats. Lu Yi, on the other hand, didn't move at all. He steadied his body and his long saber spun. The moment the tiger pounced, a great sun suddenly exploded. The large sun was like a lotus flower, and it bloomed layer by layer. Each petal was an extremely ferocious saber light, and it enveloped the tiger's body. The tiger's roar rang out again, and it was deafening. The saber lotus spun, and the light was resplendent, making it impossible for people to see the battle clearly. The most nervous person in the stands was Walnut. Under her master's instigation, she had once again placed her bet on Lu Yi, so she was naturally very nervous. End of chapter. Chapter 1910. When Walnut bet on Lu Yi in the last match, she had made up her mind. Because of Heaven Inkstone's reputation, she didn't know if Lu Yi could win. But Lu Yi actually won, even though she didn't understand what was going on. In fact, she didn't want to bet on this match because Abdullah's reputation was too great. She felt that no matter how strong Lu Yi was, it was impossible for him to be stronger than Abdullah. If she bet, it would only be a waste. She had already won enough before. But she couldn't resist her honored master's persuasion. She didn't know why, but in a moment of confusion, she had bet all her Azura seals on Lu Yi. But now it was too late for regret. She was so nervous that her palms were sweating. She couldn't help but ask, "Honored master, which one of them is stronger?" The woman on the side was watching the battle in the arena with a grim expression. "Lu Yi is at a disadvantage. It doesn't look good." Walnut's voice trembled, her entire body going limp. "I'm just kidding. Look at your useless appearance. You can't even handle this little bit of wind and rain? How will I take you out to see the world in the future?" The woman glanced at her disciple. How could she know who was stronger? If she encountered such a battle outside, she could still make a clear judgment because she could perceive it through her divine sense. However, the barrier of the fighting arena blocked her perception. She could only rely on her eyes to see, and she could not see much at all. "Honored master, you're hurting me." Walnut lowered her head and looked at her hand, which was now in her honored master's grasp. Honored master was obviously not as calm as she looked. Indeed, this was the battle with the most bets in her honored master's history. It would be a lie to say that she wasn't nervous, but she knew that compared to being nervous, her honored master actually enjoyed the process of waiting for the result more. At this moment, in the middle of the battlefield, the gradually expanding saber lotus suddenly collapsed, revealing the figures of a man and a tiger. Another round of exclamations rang out from the stands. This was because the claws of the tiger transformed by Sibaluo were blocked by Lu Ye's saber and scabbard respectively, and the tiger opened its bloody mouth to bite down on his head. If this bite connected, victory and defeat would be decided immediately. However, at this moment, Lu Ye's blood vitality suddenly surged. Her hands exerted strength, and with a surge of magic power, she directly pushed the tiger away. The eyes of the tiger that Abdullah had transformed into were clearly filled with astonishment. In the first clash, he had already sensed that Lu Ye's physical strength was not inferior to his own. This was undoubtedly somewhat inconceivable because Lu Yi was clearly a weapon cultivator. It was more or less abnormal for a weapon cultivator to possess such power. He had thought that was the limit of Lu Ye's power. However, that was not his limit. After performing the savage beast transformation and transforming into an ancient tiger, his physical strength had increased by at least 20%. Who would have thought that Lu Yi would actually be able to receive it? He was certain that Lu Yi hadn't used any kind of secret technique. This was undoubtedly his own strength. There was actually someone in this world with such a sturdy physique? Abdul was shocked, but he was also excited. He knew that he had underestimated Lu Yi. Lu Yi was indeed an opponent who was qualified to compete with him. His figure flew far away, and as soon as he landed, Abdullah felt an extremely oppressive aura pressing down on him. He looked up and saw Lu Yi charging over with his saber in hand. Roar! Another tiger roar rang out, and the tiger's figure changed again. Lines on the surface of his body lit up, and the giant tiger rapidly thinned, but his overall body undoubtedly became smoother. Lu Yi watched this scene. Although he had learned from Gei and Walnut that Abdullah cultivated the savage beast transformation, he was still slightly surprised to see it with his own eyes. Transforming into a tiger was Abdullah's first transformation, and at this moment, he had undoubtedly displayed the second. All of a sudden, the tiger transformed into a pitch-black cheetah. Lu Ye's swift slash actually brushed past the cheetah's body and struck empty air. Instead, the cheetah took the opportunity to attack from the side. Its movements were much faster than before. Lu Yi raised his saber to block, but the huge force caused his body to involuntarily slide to the side. Before he could stabilize himself, the cheetah pounced again. Lu Yi roughly understood that each transformation of the savage beast transformation had its own unique characteristics. Compared to the savage tiger transformation, Abdullah's speed had been greatly increased by the second transformation. He exhaled softly, and the flesh on his saber-wielding right arm began to wriggle. In an instant, saber light filled the sky. The spectating cultivators in the stands were dumbfounded, because at this moment, the speed of the man and the beast's battle was so fast that they could not see clearly. In addition to the saber light filling the sky, there seemed to be countless Lu Yes and Abdullahs, each and every one of them competing with Abdullah. Even Honored Walnut's honored master could not tell which was the real body and which was the illusion without using his divine sense. Abdullah was extremely excited, but at the same time, he was also shocked, because he never thought that there would be such a person in this world. When he used the savage tiger transformation, his strength was inferior to his opponent's, but when he transformed into a cheetah, his opponent was actually able to keep up with his speed. If he had not personally experienced it, he would not have dared to believe that such a balanced cultivation existed in this world. Suddenly, the saber light filling the sky disappeared, along with the countless afterimages. In the center of the field, Lu Yi maintained his saber posture, but the place where he stood was already occupied by a giant python. The giant python raised its head in a spiral shape, flicking its forked tongue. The giant python's body suddenly contracted, and the surrounding space turned into a cage, obviously trying to bind Lu Yi. At this moment, Lu Ye's hair stood on end. If he was really bound like this, with the strength that Abdullah had shown before, even if he had other means, it would be difficult for him to use them. Activating the vertical sweep technique, he waved his saber to break the invisible imprisoning force around him, almost jumping out the moment the giant python's body tightened. In this situation, unless he used his imperial item to draw the void spirit rune in advance, he could only use the vertical sweep technique to escape. When he leaped into the air and was about to pounce down, his eyes narrowed. The giant python had already disappeared and was replaced by an indomitable minotaur. It was as if an ox demon had transformed into a human form. Two inverted horns lingered with a cold light, and thick hair covered its entire body. Its body was more than 100 feet tall, and it brought about an extremely terrifying visual impact. The fourth transformation. A cultivator on the grandstand exclaimed, when Abdullah fought with Gu Sheng, the highest he could display was the 5 transformations of savage beasts. I never thought that he would have to display the 4 transformations of savage beasts against Lu Yi. I wonder if Lu Yi would be able to force him to his limits. The Minotaur demon, Abdullah, stared at Lu Yi with his scarlet eyes, then suddenly raised a foot and stomped on the ground. Without a sound, pitch-black cracks spread out in all directions from where he stomped, as if the entire space had been broken by his stomp. Lu Yi suddenly felt his vision turn upside down, immediately understanding that he had been affected by his opponent's move. Taking advantage of this opportunity, Abdullah stretched out a large hand and swatted it at Lu Yi with a momentum that blotted out the sky. It looked like he was swatting at a buzzing mosquito. Although the arena was large, Lu Yi felt as if he couldn't dodge Abdullah's attack. He made a prompt decision and closed his eyes. When he opened them again, his magic power ferociously poured into the mountain pan saber. He raised the saber high, and the blade shone brightly. In the blink of an eye, a giant saber shadow appeared. The size of the saber shadow was astonishing. The Minotaur demon's palm blotted out the sky, and the saber shadow slashed down at the same time. Heaven-splitting saber. The collision of magic power caused countless vortexes to appear in the arena, blurring the figures of the 2 combatants. Only the sonorous cry of a bird could be heard. When the spectators once again saw the scene in the arena, they were all shocked to discover that Abdullah had already used the 5th transformation of the Savage Beast transformation. He had turned into a golden-winged roc, and beside the roc, there was a tiny figure fighting with him with a saber. The battle was extremely intense. Streaks of golden light shot out as the great prng flapped its wings, but they couldn't harm Lu Yi at all. Instead, they were used by him, causing the golden-winged great prng to be flustered. Lu Yi realized that each transformation of Abdullah's Savage Beast transformation was stronger than the previous one. There should be no order in this transformation. In other words, if the tiger transformation was Abdullah's 5th transformation, then the tiger transformation would be the strongest. At this moment, his 5th transformation was the golden-winged roc, so this form was the strongest. At this moment, the pressure Lu Yi felt from Abdullah's strength was much stronger than it had been in the beginning. But it was still within the range of what he could handle. Lu Yi was looking forward to Abdullah's 6th transformation. As far as he knew, the Savage Beast transformation's real name was the Savage Beast 9 transformations. In other words, there were a total of 9 transformations, so Lu Yi wanted to know how strong Abdullah would be in the 9th transformation. While he was thinking, Abdullah suddenly retreated. Lu Yi frowned slightly and didn't pursue. The golden-winged roc quickly shrunk and returned to Abdullah's appearance. His skin was now incomparably red, as if it was soaked in blood. His eyes were filled with fighting spirit as he spat out visible qi. Amazing! You're the 2nd opponent besides Gu Sheng to withstand my 5th transformation. I want to see the 6th transformation. Lu Yi looked at him. Abdullah laughed loudly. That won't do. My foundation is not enough. If I use the 6th transformation, I'll lose my life. It's a desperate move. Lu Yi was stunned. Originally, he was wondering why Gu Sheng only used the 5th transformation in his fight with Abdullah if the Savage Beast transformation had 9 transformations. It turned out that there was such a reason. Even someone as strong as Abdullah could only use the 5th transformation. If he forcefully used the 6th transformation, even if he managed to kill his opponent, he wouldn't have a good ending. There was indeed a rule in place to protect the cultivators of both sides from losing their lives during the battle, but this protection did not apply to Abdullah, who had used his 6th transformation. The injuries a cultivator would receive during the battle were real and tangible. Once Abdullah used the 6th transformation, the huge damage to his foundation was enough to cause him to lose his life. That's a pity. Lu Yi felt a little regretful. He had a rough understanding of Abdullah's strength. He was stronger than Lionheart, so it seemed that Gu Sheng was about the same level. This made him feel a little disappointed. Was this the standard of the top 2 on the Yu Yao ranking? End of chapter. Chapter 1911. Just as Lu Yi was thinking about this, 5 explosive sounds suddenly rang out from Abdullah's body. Following the explosions, his aura became extremely dangerous. Lu Yi immediately understood that Abdullah's strongest form had appeared. He really couldn't use the 6th transformation. That was a secret technique he used to put his life on the line. Naturally, he couldn't use it to compete with Lu Yi, but that didn't mean he didn't have a stronger form. After the 5 transformations of the savage beast, Abdullah could also use another technique. With this technique, a portion of the improvements brought to him by each transformation would be stored in his body and would be unleashed at the same time at this moment. To put it simply, in this state, Abdullah had fused the buffs from the 5 transformations. Although there was a limit to the buffs, it was undoubtedly more powerful than the 5 transformations alone. Most importantly, it would not damage his foundation, and his life would not be in danger. Every time he fought with Gu Sheng, the victor would be decided in this kind of state. For so many years, only Gu Sheng could force him into this state, but today, Lu Yi had appeared. At this moment, Abdullah didn't have any of his beast form. Instead, he had returned to his original form, but his body seemed to be 30% larger. When Lu Yi looked at him, he felt as if his entire body had turned into a black hole, swallowing everything around him. What surprised Lu Yi even more was that an eye-catching symbol had suddenly appeared on Abdullah's forehead. It was a star-shaped pattern that felt strangely familiar to him. Lu Yi was stunned for a moment, but he soon realized that Abdullah had also condensed the flower of the body. He was a cultivator who had reached the peak of the constellation realm. That's right, according to his understanding of the 3 flowers, this was a very ancient method that belonged to the cultivators of ancient times. The current cultivation environment wasn't suitable for the promotion of this ancient method, so the 3 flowers had long since been eliminated. However, the ancient barbarian world where the barbarians came from had always maintained the cultivation environment of the desolate era. As an outstanding member of the barbarians, it wasn't strange that Abdullah cultivated the 3 flowers. It could even be said that the barbarians were the most suitable to cultivate the 3 flowers in this world. Other cultivators who came from other parts of the starry sky didn't have such a convenient and unique environment. The appearance of the flower of the body meant that Abdullah was prepared to go all out. Lu Ye's expression turned serious. All of a sudden, the phenomena around Abdo vanished, and even the flower of the body disappeared. At this moment, Abdo returned to his normal state. Many of the cultivators in the stands were confused and instinctively thought that Abdullah's secret technique had failed, causing the phenomena to disappear. However, Lu Yi, who was directly facing him, knew that this wasn't a sign of the secret technique's failure. Instead, it was because Abdullah had perfect control over his own power that no external force leaked out. This is getting interesting. Lu Yi had been wondering why the top 2 experts on the Yueyao ranking were so weak, but now he knew that they were indeed quite capable. Let's fight. Abdullah softly spat out a few words. Just as his voice fell, his afterimage was still in place, but his real body had already arrived in front of Lu Yi. Wrapped in an unstoppable momentum, he punched towards Lu Yi. Compared to before, his speed was much faster. This punch almost brushed past Lu Yi's body. When the fist landed, it didn't spread any power, as if it was just an ordinary punch. However, Lu Yi, who was flying backwards, suddenly felt half of his body go numb. In the next instant, the space where he was originally standing shattered like a shattered mirror. Although it quickly recovered, he could still see the power of this punch. His heart trembled. He had only been grazed by the opponent's fist, but if he had been hit, even with his current physique, he would have been defeated immediately. Abdullah was definitely the strongest Yueyao he had ever seen. Compared to Lionheart, who he had killed in the 10,000 Elephant Sea, he was on a completely different level. After missing his punch, Abdullah pressed forward and punched again. This time, Lu Yi didn't retreat and raised his saber to meet the attack. The moment the fist and saber collided, a violent explosion resounded throughout the arena, but that was all. After a short while, the expressions of the cultivators in the spectator stands became strange. Because the fighting state of the 2 in the fighting arena was rather strange at this moment. As far as the eye could see, their speed was not fast, far from the dazzling intensity from before. Even if it was only one constellation, one could still clearly see the attacks and defenses between them. What was even more strange and puzzling was that every time they clashed, only sounds would be heard. There was no leakage of transcendence energy, nor was there any dazzling light. The two figures, one big and one small, both had serious expressions on their faces. They were fighting very seriously. But to put it bluntly, even a fight between cultivators in the spirit stream realm who had just started cultivating would be more interesting than a fight between these two. The constellations couldn't see much of it. They only felt that the fight between Lu Yi and Abdullah was far less exciting than the fight between Abdullah and Gu Sheng. If these two were to clash, it would be like lightning striking the earth, fighting in full swing, dazzling the spectators. Then they looked at what was in front of them. Yu Yao, on the other hand, was deep in thought. Beside Walnut, her master couldn't help but sit up straight. Her expression was solemn as she watched the fight in the arena, her face full of disbelief. These two guys, Master, what's wrong? Walnut had never seen her master reveal such an expression. Surprise, shock, and even some yearning? The woman stared at the two figures in the arena and exclaimed, "Sure enough, there are new talents in every generation. If these two can advance to the Sunshine Realm, their futures will definitely be limitless. No, with their current aptitude and foundation, advancing to the Sunshine Realm will definitely not be a problem." Walnut's eyes turned, and she deliberately said, "They're only fighting like this. How can Master see anything?" She vaguely sensed something, but due to her limited eyesight, she couldn't be sure, so she wanted to ask her master for some guidance. The woman said, "What do you know? Don't think that just because their fight isn't exciting, they can't do it. In fact, these two people's control of their own power has reached an unimaginable level. That's why there aren't any aftershocks in their every clash, because none of their power is wasted. Just this point alone is something that not many people in the starry sky can achieve." "Then what about you, Master?" Walnut asked. The woman didn't say anything. If it were under normal circumstances, she would naturally be able to achieve this, but if she was fighting with an opponent of similar strength, it was simply impossible. This was because if the opponent's strength was on par with hers, she would have to fight with her life on the line. Under such circumstances, who could completely control their own power? She couldn't do it, but the two guys below could. Just this point alone made her inferior to those two little guys. In the arena, Abdullah's expression was incomparably serious, but the surprise in his eyes couldn't be concealed. Lu Yi being able to withstand his 5 beast transformations was already shocking enough, but who would have thought that he couldn't do anything to the other party in this state? It should be known that even Gu Sheng wouldn't dare to face him head-on in this state. Of course, Gu Sheng was a Dharma cultivator and would never be able to compete with him in this way. But this human opposite him had done it. He had used a secret technique, but what about the other party? From beginning to end, he had never seen the other party use a secret technique that could increase his strength. In other words, the strength that the other party was displaying at this moment was something that he already possessed in his normal state. This was simply too shocking. As these thoughts flashed through his mind, he suddenly saw the aura on Lu Ye's body change. In an instant, Abdullah couldn't help but feel an extreme sense of danger. He knew that Lu Yi was about to use a killing move, so he didn't dare to be careless. He immediately focused his attention on the attack. But what made him feel strange was that Lu Yi didn't show any signs of using a killing move. He continued to slash down with his saber just like before. As Abdullah raised his arm to block, he clenched his other hand into a fist and punched at Lu Ye's chest. The moment the Pan Mountain saber came into contact with Abdullah's arm, Lu Ye's right hand, along with the Pan Mountain saber, suddenly began to vibrate violently. This vibration was difficult to detect unless it came into direct contact. From an outsider's point of view, Lu Ye's saber didn't seem to have changed at all. Blood splattered. Abdullah's expression was somewhat stunned, and the spectating cultivators in the stands cried out in alarm. Abdullah was injured. The supreme powerhouse of Yu Yao, whose body was so powerful that it made cultivators of the same level feel despair, was actually injured. This was something that not even Gu Sheng could accomplish. In the past, when Abdullah and Gusheng fought, there were always times when Gusheng was injured, but Abdullah had never been injured. This was because all of Gusheng's techniques were unable to harm his terrifyingly tough body. Gusheng had always won because Abdullah could no longer maintain his 5 transformations secret art. Although this secret art was powerful, the more powerful it was, the more energy it consumed. Abdullah couldn't maintain it for too long. But today, that ordinary saber strike had injured Abdullah and caused him to bleed. His blood wasn't a normal red, but a dark red that leaned toward black. This was a unique characteristic of the barbarian tribe. This unprecedented battle, this incomprehensible battle, instantly ignited the passion of all the cultivators in the stands. The battle between these two wasn't very exciting, but there was no doubt that this simple and unadorned battle contained great danger. The pain from his arm didn't affect Abdullah in the slightest. He ignored it and punched out with even more power. Luyi had no time to retreat. Layers of Holy Guardian Spirit inscriptions appeared on his chest. In the blink of an eye, there were more than a dozen layers. As a late-stage Yu Yao cultivator, any one of his Holy Guardian Spirit inscriptions could block an attack from a Yu Yao of the same level. But against Abdullah, he didn't dare to be careless. If not for the lack of time, he would have inscribed more than a dozen layers. With a crash, Abdullah's punch shattered all the layers of Holy Guardian Spirit inscriptions. Luyi's chest shook violently. End of chapter. That you're tuning in to the Han Li's Immortal Journey YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.